The stream is fired up across the internet. If you're not familiar with the program, we do multi-stream, which means we're on a number of different platforms, places like Facebook and Periscope, Twitter. We're also on YouTube, and we're even on Twitch, if you can believe that. But YouTube always takes a little minute or two to get going, and we'd like to make sure that we're live, and it looks like we are. So let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful, sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. We help them navigate through the criminal justice system, and over our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with that very system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a thing called justice, and it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And so that's why we started this program called Watching the Watchers, so that together we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon that very system with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. And that's why we're so grateful that you are here and with us today for a very special live stream. We are going to be covering the Georgia special election that is taking place literally right now. This is a big election. Many people, I think, have checked out of the election news thus far, largely because it's been going on for 2 months. And now, as 2021 comes out with a bang, we've got yet another one that is extremely important for the country. And so what I would like to do is we've got about 30 minutes or so until we're expecting the first results to come in. And so I would like to go through and sort of outline and just give a little bit of a refresher on all of the different candidates. So if you're not familiar with them, we're talking about Senator David Perdue. We've also got Kelly Loeffler. We have Reverend Raphael Warnock, and then we've got Jon Ossoff. And so we're going to go through. I've got a slide for each one of those individuals. We're going to look back at who they are. Okay, I'm an Arizona boy, born and raised here. I don't know much about Georgia politics. I know some information that we've read in the news, but unless you've sort of been in Georgia, I'm going to guess that many of you are sort of in the same position that I was. That who are these people? What do they stand for? What are they doing? And what can we expect from them if they get elected? So we want to break that down a little bit. We're going to talk about there is some litigation that's going on, of course, because there's a very important election, and we're going to talk about some of that. There's also a U.S. attorney who just sort of abruptly resigned, which is sort of leaving everybody scratching their heads. And so we got a lot to get into. Before we do, let me remind you that we do go live at this time every single day of the week, and this is a good place to be. We would invite you to subscribe. Join us on the Discord server. That's where we chat both before and after the show. I'm going to go through some slides. A copy of those slides will be available in the Discord server, so you can feel free to just go on over there and grab those. And that's it. So let's take a quick look before we dive into the material. Let's see what the results are looking like at the moment. So we're going to be bouncing around at a couple different websites, and the first one we want to take a look at is here on the Washington Post. So looks like the polls closed at 7 p.m., so 3 minutes ago. They're awaiting results. We can see here it's David Perdue versus Jon Ossoff, and no results reported yet. We've also got Loeffler versus Warnock. No results reported yet. So Georgians are once again voting for both of their U.S. senators. And so we're going to just be checking back in on those results over on the New York Times website. Let's see what they've got going on here. Same thing, no results. The polls literally just closed. So we're going to check back and see what is happening on those different websites sporadically as we go through the presentation. And so let's take a look at these individual candidates. I want to start with Senator David Perdue. So he was a senator. He was actually elected in 2014. He's currently a sitting senator, but kind of not really, because his term expired on January 3rd when the new Congress was sworn in. So Georgia's sort of in this weird scenario where they have sort of a missing vacant Senate seat right now, and that is David Perdue. He was elected in 2014, and so he's been serving on the Senate since that time, and he's been on a number of different committees. He's been on the Armed Services Committee, the Banking Committee, the Budget Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, and so on. So he's been around for about 6 years. That's a long, 6 years, 7 years now. So this would be his second term. So he's been around the block. He's also somebody who he was the senior vice president of a company called Reebok. You probably know them, right? The shoe company, and also was the CEO of the Dollar General stores. So this guy has a lot of business experience. And, if you're a Republican, that goes a long way. People like that in their candidates. They want somebody who's going to go in there and run the country sort of like a business, right? Cut waste, maximize potential output, return on investment. All of those kinds of concepts are very, I would say, appealing to a lot of conservatives and a lot of Republicans. He, like I said, his Senate term expired on January 3rd, and he's probably not going to vote tomorrow. So remember, let's frame this out a little bit. The Senate race right now is, I don't know, the second most important thing going on politically, and it's very important. It might be the first most important thing depending on where you stand on this. But let's take a step back and think about what the country is looking at right now. We have the president-elect, allegedly Joe Biden, is going to get confirmed according to the standard traditional line of thinking tomorrow. That's when the U.S. House of Representatives has a joint session, and all of the state votes, all of those electoral votes that we've been fighting over for these last 2 months, they're going to finally be counted on the floor of the House. There's going to be a joint session there, and we've been, for the last 2 months, sort of speculating and keeping a tally on what senators are going to object, what House representatives are going to object, and tomorrow is the culmination of that. So one of the other questions here is, well, what about these two senators? They're going to be are they in the Senate? Are they out of the Senate? What is their role in this? And if this Senate election is resolved tonight, are they going to be available to participate tomorrow? And I think the answer, at least for Senator Perdue, is no. And his office has also confirmed that, as well as I think the Secretary of State in Georgia, Brad Raffensperger. His office has also confirmed that they're not expecting him to vote or the election to be certified by tomorrow, because the vote's going to happen tonight. I'm going to guess, unless it's a blowout, there's not going to be a decision one way or the other. We're already hearing that there's going to be litigation. There is litigation currently in motion. And so are we expecting David Perdue to be involved in the hearing tomorrow at all? No, because the term expired. He's probably not going to get confirmed or certified or sworn into a second term if he does win tonight until sometime down the road. So can expect him to not be involved tomorrow. He's probably very happy about that, probably sort of relishing in the fact that he doesn't have to make that decision. We know that a lot of other Republicans have been sort of caught in this divide where, if you're going to support the President Trump, and object to the votes, well, you're going to really alienate a lot of the middle of the road independent voters. And if you go the other route, then and you are not supportive of the president, then you're going to alienate the conservative Trump voters, and you're going to get primaried the next election season. So he doesn't have to make that decision, and he is sort of immune from a lot of the criticism that are going to follow from the other individuals who do have to cast that vote and take a hard stand tomorrow. So, that being said, he has indicated that he supports election fraud inquiries. And, it's sort of that neutral language. Yesterday, we spent some time talking about the different buckets in which the Republicans sort of fall. And we talked about one bucket where they're going to object to everything. They're going to object to the electoral votes as they hit the House floor. And then when they break off into their separate House committees and independent bodies, the Senate goes with the Senate, the House goes with the House. They're also going to object in their individual debates. So that's one bucket. The other bucket is sort of this main, this just asking questions group, right? Oh, I've got a lot of questions about the election irregularities. They're not saying that this was a fraudulent election or a stolen election. They're just saying, well, like many Americans, I got a lot of questions about this. I support a committee. I support investigating that stuff. And then on the far end, on the far left, it's this election was perfect. No fraud at all. No widespread fraud. No systemic fraud. No credible fraud. Everybody who thinks so is seditious, a traitor, or executing a coup. And so there's that bucket as well. But I would say that David Perdue, sort of there in the middle. He's not going to be there in the Senate, doesn't have to be. And so his office has sort of been straddling that line a little bit. And we're going to see how that works out for him this upcoming election. Now, Senator David Perdue, if I'm not mistaken, was also, we're going to see with Kelly Loeffler, sort of in this category of senators that during the COVID thing, they got into a little bit of, I would say, eyeballs were on them forcefully because of some stock trades, right? We saw that as many other senators, I think, were sort of scooped up in that. But these two senators, Perdue and Loeffler, were both involved in that little scandal. Now, they were investigated by the Senate, I think by some other agencies as well, and they found that there was nothing wrong with what they did. They were, selling stocks, I think, with some level of blindness so that they weren't, going into very top secretive, secure meetings in government and knowing that a lockdown was coming, and then made some stock moves after the fact. I think that they were sort of cleared. Now, you know me, right? Am I somebody who's just going to defer to the government, especially when they're investigating themselves, and say that they probably did a good job on that? Not likely, right? If the Senate's going to be investigating the senators, they're probably going to find that most of them are in the clear, because I would suspect that most of them are doing that type of stuff anyways. Now, I don't know. That's just speculation, but it is something important to mention. So the question is going to be, what does Georgia think about that? Are they going to remember that? Is this going to impact the outcome of the election? We don't know, but it's good to just sort of get it out. In the law, there's something that we talk about called drawing the sting. If you're going to be presenting bad information about something, just sort of draw that out so you can take the sting away from the other side. And that this whole ordeal with the stock and the COVID-19 lockdown and the improper trades and so on, we don't know if that is going to be lingering. Did that sting happen months ago, back in March when we had our lockdowns, or is this going to be something that is still fresh and in the minds of the voters? We'll see tonight. We next have Jon Ossoff. Ossoff, I think is how you say his name. And this guy, doesn't have a very long resume. Young man, I think he's 33 years old, right around my age. And he has already run for office one time. He actually ran for the Georgia House in 2017, got close to winning, but ultimately lost. This was sort of like, I think, the first iteration of Beto. And, when Beto was running against Ted Cruz, raised a ton of money, got a lot of attention, sort of had a lot of that Hollywood money, sort of going his direction. All of the sort of the mainstream liberal groups were very, very loud in favor of Beto. And if you don't remember, back in 2017, sort of the same story with Jon. This is Jon here, and he ran it, but he ultimately lost that race. So I think it was a 51% to a small margin there, 48% back in 2017, but he ultimately lost. Prior to that election, he was a national security staffer, and he was an aide to the U.S. representative who went by the name of Hank Johnson for 5 years. And then apparently, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I got this information from CNN. There's an article. If you want the slides, you can get a link to the article. But they said that he inherited money and bought into a film production company known as Insight TWI. And so they were making movies about, or documentaries about, ISIS killings, sex slavery, all that type of stuff. And, I'm not real sure what his involvement was other than being a producer, but that's his background. And so he ran in 2017 after some time as a national security staffer and as a U.S. representative's aide. He talks a lot about, on his website, we were trying to gather some more information about him. On his website specifically, 3 issues that he thinks Georgians are mostly interested in, and it's going to be healthcare, clean energy, and a good economy, which are, pretty standard talking points, I think, for most Democratic politicians. And so this is what is known in Georgia as a special election. It's a runoff election. And the reason why this had to happen, why are we not seeing this around in other states? Why are we seeing this only happening in Georgia tonight? Well, because Georgia has this weird rule that you have to capture over 50% of the votes in order for you to win. Okay, even if you win by 2 percentage points, that's not enough. You got to be over 50. You got to capture that majority. And I was wondering why they had that rule. And some people were sort of hearkening this back to the days of slavery, where they didn't want one candidate to sort of work their way through the mainstream candidate. And so they wanted, to provide an opportunity for a lot of the power to consolidate. Basically, what they didn't want is one black guy to take out a group of white guys. Because if the white guys spread the votes across 5 white guys, and you have one black guy and he gets, 25% of the vote, and the other guys split, by 5 ways, 75% of the vote. Maybe the math works on that. I have no idea because I'm terrible at math, but maybe that would put the black guy in office, right? That's sort of the allegation here, that Georgia is carrying this over. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but it is something I read, which is why this weird rule exists that we don't see in other parts of the country. So these were the results back in November. So David Perdue got 2.4 million votes, won 49.73% of the votes. But again, because that's not over 50%, then he does not win. And so they've got to come back and do this thing again. So literally, 2 months ago on November, this was the result. We had this libertarian candidate who's also in the mix who got 2%. So if you would say, even if you split that, if the libertarian was not running and you gave Republican David Perdue one of his votes or 1% and you gave Jon 1%, that would be enough to put David Perdue over the threshold. And if you're going to be based off of those numbers, then it looks like David Perdue, as long as that trend holds, there is no libertarian candidate now. If those libertarian candidates or that candidate, those voters end up in the David Perdue camp, then maybe he wins re-election again. So that's one possibility. Now, the other possibility, according to the polls, is that the whole country has shifted pretty dramatically. There's this election that took place on November 3rd. A lot has happened since then. And so if you're sort of somebody who gobbles up a lot of the mainstream news, it's been a little bit of a mess, right? We've had some vaccine distribution problems. We've had, the Trump phone call that was just the October surprise that we got last night, and so on and so forth, especially in light of a lot of this electoral vote objection, right? I mean, a lot of the country is really divided on this stuff. And we've been covering this at length here on this program. We've been talking about the different senators who are going to be objecting. And even within the GOP, within the own Republican Party, they're getting pretty visceral with each other. So you've got those who are going to be objecting, Ted Cruz and co. And then on the other side, you've got Ben Sasse and Scott, and you've got, this other sort of contingent of the more mainstream Republicans who are not going to be objecting. And they're starting to call each other some names and actually, get a little bit specific. Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, they're calling these individuals out. And that can be off-putting to a lot of people. You were seeing a lot in the media. We played a clip from Jake Tapper last night where he was talking specifically about calling people, the sedition caucus or the coup caucus, calling everybody traitors who's even talking about these issues. And that stuff can leave a mark. If you have the media saying that day after day after day after day, people might start to believe that, and it may have really alienated the Republicans. Okay, remember all of this stuff, just as a quick recap, that we've covered in Georgia. There was Lynn Wood out there. There was Sidney Powell. There was, Stop the Steal rallies. There was a big movement that said that anybody who is going to be, sort of in the Stop the Steal movement, they shouldn't be voting in this race. Their argument was, if the election of the president, if Donald Trump's election was fraudulent, why are you participating in this election? In other words, don't feed a broken beast. Just leave it, let it lie, don't participate. I've been very opposed to that. I mean, I understand the frustration there, but you still got to play. You can't win the game if you don't play the game. And if you just sort of concede, if the Republicans wanted to concede or followed the advice of Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell, it's a no-brainer. Democrats are going to win the Senate. That might lead them to, move to pack the court. Could be a big problem if you are a Republican. So the I'm taking my ball and going home approach is not the right approach. But we're going to see if that has an impact. According to the polls, these are the aggregate polls that we just pulled this morning. So according to 270 to Win, these polls were taken from December 15th to January 3rd. This one, December 14th, over from Real Clear Politics, and November 9th to January 4th. So this is the most sort of recent one. And you can see that they've all got Ossoff up by several points. So 270 to Win, these were all updated yesterday. They've all got him up by 2.8, 1.0, 1.8, 1.8, sort of across the board. And there's still this bigger margin here of undecideds. So every single one of these polls has a number of undecided voters, and they could split one way or the other. We just don't know. So that's where that race stands. This one's obviously pretty important. If you're not real familiar with what the Senate looks like, these two Senate seats are very important because currently they are in the Republican categories. Kelly Loeffler was appointed. We're going to talk about her next. And Daniel Perdue is also a Republican senator. Right? They're sort of finishing up their terms. They go back to the Congress if they win their elections tonight. That means that the Senate is now 52 to 48. Republicans, if they win these two election seats tonight, they're going to retain control of the Senate, 52 to 48. If the Democrats sweep tonight, if they win both of these seats, it's going to be 50-50. Those two from the 50 are going to go over to the 48. It's going to be 50-50. What happens if Joe Biden is confirmed, inaugurated on January 20th? We have a tiebreaker who goes by the name of Kamala Harris. And so anytime we have a split, 50-50 split along partisan lines, Kamala Harris comes in and casts that deciding vote. Isn't that fun? So Senator Kelly Loeffler is the other individual who's running for office right now, and she's up for election tonight. She is a current, quote, sitting senator. Like I said, she's sort of in one of these precarious positions because hers is very unique. She was appointed by Governor Kemp after a senator by the name of Isaacson retired for health. Okay, so he retired, I don't know how long ago, but his term ultimately expires in 2022. And so the way that Georgia works is, you appoint a special you appoint an acting senator, in other words, and that person fulfills that role until it's time for the next election. At that point, the people get to vote. The next senator that the people vote into office will carry out that term. Because she's already been appointed, she's running again. And if she wins, she'll carry out the term until 2022. So the difference here would be that she is still in the Senate pending the result of the election, meaning that she can object to the electoral votes. And yesterday she was at a rally with the president over in Georgia, and she made a statement to that effect. Now, a little bit more about Miss Loeffler, and she is the former CEO of BAKKT, a financial services company. And I read over on Wikipedia that was sort of a subsidiary of her husband's company, which is this big financial services sort of conglomerate. So I don't really know what her involvement there was, but she's the CEO of it. And interestingly, that mirrors what Daniel Perdue's resume looks like, right? Also a business person, also a CEO of the Dollar General store, and so on. And so they're sort of running in tandem. They've got this, smart business person persona that they're trying to convey to Georgians to see if they'll vote them into the Senate. She also is the co-owner of the WNBA team called The Dream, which, I'm not a big WNBA fan, but that's pretty neat, right? Co-owner of a basketball team, not bad. Like I mentioned previously, she was caught in the COVID-19 stock scandal. An ethics investigation, however, found that there was no violation. Last night, she appeared with Donald Trump at the Georgia rally, and she has stated on record that she will be objecting to the electoral votes. So she should be there tomorrow, and we'll see what happens in Congress. She is running against, Miss Kelly Loeffler is running against this guy. His name is Reverend Raphael Warnock. He is the senior pastor at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, and he's been doing that since 2005. And he is somebody who, I think his first sermon was when he was like 12 years old. He's sort of been doing this for a very long time. And I did not know this either, but this was Martin Luther King Jr.'s church. So this is where he sort of grew up and was giving, his sermons as well, and communicating to the same church, which is pretty cool, right? A lot of interesting history there. In 2002, he was the subject of a child abuse obstruction inquiry at a church camp. So that was interesting, and we haven't really followed that story here on this channel, but I've seen a lot of the headlines about it. And this one it's one of those it's hard to sort of sink your teeth into, right? This happened in 2002. The prosecutors ultimately dropped the charges. They said it was a miscommunication when Reverend Warnock was going through and communicating about this stuff. He said that really all I was trying to do is make sure that an attorney was present there prior to anybody here being questioned, which is actually very good advice. Okay, so I can't beat the guy up for that. Anytime the police want to come and question you, you've got a right to have an attorney present. You got to affirmatively invoke that. You got to say, hey, I want an attorney here, and you have a right to remain silent. I always recommend people use it at every single turn. It's not one of those optional things. It's very, very unlikely that you're going to be able to talk yourself out of anything. So just don't say anything, period. And it sounds like that's what sort of happened here. Again, it's from 2002. And it feels a little bit like electioneering, conversations about this stuff. The Washington Post ran with Donald Trump's last minute October surprise. It kind of felt like that to me as well. But ultimately, those charges were dropped. So no liability there for him. In 2013, he delivered the benediction for Obama. And he was very, very vocal in his church talking about Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. So that's a little bit about the Reverend. Now, if we take a look back at what happened in 2020 on the November election, this was a very, very crowded election. Here are the results. Remember, we just showed you the results from Perdue and Ossoff, and there were only 3 people there. We had just two main candidates, one Republican and one Democrat, and then we had the Libertarian. These are all the people that ran last time in Georgia for this seat. A lot of people. And so the numbers are kind of interesting to dissect here, see if we can glean anything from it. So if you just look at the top number, the top line here, Raphael Warnock won with 1.6 million votes. He got 32% of the total to Kelly Loeffler's 1.27, and she got 25% of the vote. But if you start going through and sort of tallying these things up, you got to, it was a close race because presumably all of these other Republicans are going to go for Miss Loeffler, whereas all of the Democrats, you would presume, would go for Mr. Warnock. And so Doug Collins was a Republican, almost 1 million votes there. Then the next four of them actually, in fact, are all going for Warnock. So 1 million plus, a million-ish goes over to Kelly, and then we've got, it looks like 600,000 votes that would go over to Raphael, which would make it basically tie. Okay, so if you just add up all of those numbers just with some rudimentary math, which I'm terrible at, it's really close. And all of those other line numbers are smaller numbers, so there's sort of inconsequential. Less than 1% are the vast majority. The other candidates got less than 1%. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. According to the polls, here we've got another close race. This is what we see from 270 to win. From Real Clear Politics, from 538, we've got very close numbers. Senator or candidate Warnock is very, very close. 49.8% to 48.5%, according to Real Clear Politics. 49.4% to 47.2%. That's a margin of, looks like 2.2-ish. 2.8, 2.1 are those margins of difference there. So very close, very, very close. And a lot of people are, just considering this a total toss-up. Total toss-up. So let's keep going until we get to about a few more minutes, and then we'll check in with some of the results, which should start coming in right at about 7:30. This was a mind-blowingly expensive race. A lot of money has been pouring in here from out of the country. From outside of the state, from elsewhere in the country. The big picture, collectively, nearly $500 million worth of ads were targeting Georgia voters in the last 2 months. That is a massive amount of money. Okay, it just crushes all of the other Senate races ever. So in Georgia, the Perdue Ossoff race, $253 million. North Carolina 2020 was $245 million, so that one's very close. But Loeffler Warnock, another $238 million. So between those two races, almost $500 million there. Okay, Iowa 203. A lot of these 2020 races were pretty expensive, but nothing even really breaks 200. In Arizona, 2020, in the that must have been the Mark Kelly race, and versus who did we just lose to? Mark Kelly just beat Martha McSally, right? That was $150 million. This is another $100 million on top of that. Very, very expensive. And a lot of people have problems about this. They're saying, wait a minute, is this really a Georgia election? Or is this a national election? Or everybody from both sides just dumping money into these races? Yeah, of course they are, because it controls the Senate. We've got some more record-breaking fundraising numbers here. The top 10 Senate fundraisers in 2020 brought in more than double the money raised by the top 10 campaigns in 2018, raking over in over $1 billion collectively, according to the data filed with the FEC. So once again, just massive amounts of money. We have candidate Warnock got $125 million versus Loeffler's $92. Okay, so a major deficit there, something like $38 million there. We've also got Ossoff got $140 million raised to Perdue's $90 million. So another $50 million difference there. Big numbers. So the Republicans are being just crushed in fundraising, and they're being outspent pretty dramatically. So we'll see what happens with some of that. Let's take a look, see if we've got any results coming in, and poke around the Twitter sphere to see what is going on. We are going to swap over to the chat and to the web browser. Let's see what's going on. So here we've got our first round of results. Let's hit a refresh here on the New York Times. And it's looking like we've got 7%, 8% of the votes being reported in here. Raphael Warnock is up 60.8% to Kelly Loeffler's 39.2%. 8% reporting. Jon Ossoff is up 59.8 to 40.2%. 8% of those reports, of those votes being reported in. I was looking over here. I wanted to see, let's see what the Washington Post has. Very similar numbers. There was a statement previously from Stacey Abrams. We've been paying some attention to Stacey Abrams here. She just said about an hour and 18 minutes ago that it's going to be a tight race. And remember, Stacey Abrams is somebody that we've been really talking about this last week because her sister was in the she's a judge in the federal district court out there in Georgia. And what she was indicating is that she issued a ruling here I think we're going to talk about in a little bit. But we have Stacey Abrams, who said she's a voting rights activist there. This was kind of an interesting statement from her. So Stacey Abrams, if you're not familiar with her, she ran for the governorship of Georgia. I think it was against Brian Kemp, and it was really, really close. And then when Stacey Abrams lost, she was pretty upset about it. She said there was voter suppression all over the place. This whole election was a mess. And then she was really leaning on Joe Biden to make her the vice presidential candidate. Remember, I think she said that, I think she even came out and said, I want that job, something to that effect. And she was, being critical, I think, of some other potential VP prospects. And so she was in the limelight for a long time. Well, she has been very, very active in registering voters in the state of Georgia, and she's not real happy with what's going on over there. So Stacey Abrams said that she expressed confidence in the state's election process. Quote, "I think we can continue to make progress." Now, let's be clear. We have not fully eliminated voter suppression in Georgia or across the country, but we have made dramatic strides from even June and certainly 2008. She says Republicans for 20 years took for granted their successes. We made them fight in 2018. We made them fight in 2020. We won the battle. We're going to win this battle in 2021, whether it's by winning these two elections or by forcing Republicans to take seriously the need of Democrats, independents, and the people. We are going to be able to compel Republicans to actually talk about the issues and debate the issues as opposed to having a fait accompli for their ideas. Fait accompli, is that how you say that? And so, this is interesting because we've talked about this sort of dichotomy, this separation of the two sides and how angry they get about voting problems. On the right, if you're a Republican, a conservative, somebody who thinks that elections should be run a certain way, you're probably of the mindset that you want voter integrity, right? You want the maximum amount of people who are voting to be checked. You want IDs. You want to verify that people who they say they are, that they live at that address, that their signature matches and all of those things. It's called voter integrity. Well, the converse of that the Democrats say is this idea that, well, if you do that, you're suppressing the vote. If you're putting in place mechanisms that make sure that we can identify people, we know who they are, well, naturally, that's going to make things harder for some individuals who want to go in and vote. For example, right, if you need to have an ID, which in my mind is like the basic, most minimum thing that you could ever need or want, everybody should have one. But many people say that if you are checking an identification card, you're going to disenfranchise some people, who don't have ID, who can't afford ID, who don't want to get ID, who don't want to be identified. There's a lot of different rationales for why that is voter suppression. And so what you're seeing from Stacey Abrams on the other side is voter suppression. Right? Anything you do to sort of secure the integrity of the election is going to be voter suppression. So they want maximum voter enfranchisement. They want everybody to go vote. The converse argument that the Republicans make is that, look, listen, we want the maximum amount of people to vote. If we get a couple bad votes in there, if somebody votes twice, it's inconsequential. It's not that big of a deal. So by you, nasty Republicans, putting in all of these limitations on voting, you're just suppressing the vote. You are just making it so that people cannot go vote, and they have a difficult time doing so. And that's exactly what Stacey Abrams is saying here. So take a look back at some of the numbers. Looks like they're rolling in a little bit slowly over on the Washington Post. You can see here again. Still 8%. Take a look at some of these different counties, these different precincts, and it looks like Atlanta still, 21% has been counted over there in the surrounding Atlanta demographics or the precincts. So they're up dramatically. You'd expect some of the big cities to come in pretty heavy Democrats, and we'll see if that continues. There's another statement, another thing that was sort of reminding me of the last time we did this. If you are a regular of the program, during the November 3rd election, we had a 5-hour stream when we were watching the results come in. We're not going to be doing that tonight. I don't think that's going to be necessary. I think that, if it's close, there's going to be a lot of litigation that's going to follow us around for the foreseeable future. But there was something I thought was interesting. If you've been with our channel for some time, during the November 3rd election, we were talking specifically about this idea that early on in the night, there was going to be this red mirage. Okay, that's what a lot of the media was saying. A lot of the Democratic talking points that went out to the kind of the mainstream media and a lot of the local chairs of the DNC across the country, they were saying, beware of the red mirage. Remember that language specifically. They said there's going to be this red mirage that exists on election night. The Republicans are going to be up massively, but don't fall for the mirage, because as soon as all the votes are counted, there's going to be a lot that come in after the fact that were mailed in, that are counted a few days later. Remember, Pennsylvania moved their votes back 3 days. North Carolina moved their vote back, I think it was 9 days. And they said, wait a minute, so just don't pump the brakes, everybody. If it's looking like we're going to lose on election night, don't worry about it, because there's a whole slew, wheelbarrows full, truckloads full, vans full of more votes that are coming in later. Once we count those, it's going to change the equation dramatically. And we saw that, right? We saw that in spreadsheets, even on graphs. Even Donald Trump held that up and said, hey, see these spikes going on here in Michigan? And I think the other one was Wisconsin. And you see these massive spikes. And they said, well, that's just legitimate votes, right? They're just coming in after the fact. And the standard traditional thinking here was, yeah, the Democrats were really taking advantage of mail-in votes. They were sending, they were encouraging it dramatically throughout their constituency. So of course they're going to come back in high. That's their version of it. If you're a Republican, if you're somebody skeptical about the electoral results, you're saying, yeah, that's when they were scanning all the votes in. That's when, Hunter Biden rolled in with his van and they were just barreling them into the Staples Center over in Fulton County in Georgia, right? I mean, that's the alternative analysis there. So it's complicated, but they're re-bringing up that's a new issue again. It's coming to fruition yet again. The Democrats are warning internally. We saw this 2 months ago. They're warning internally to brace for the GOP lead at the outset. The Democrats are messaging internally to brace for a huge Republican lead when the results first come in. A senior aide, Jon Ossoff, campaign tells CNN. They anticipate that what's going to be reported first are smaller conservative counties counting in-person voting. They are expecting a majority of today's vote could go for the GOP. We will be wildly down tonight, says the senior aide, but the aides say the campaigns are urging not to read too much into tonight until the 4 big counties come in, and those are going to be closer towards the big city centers. So it looks like we're at about 10% of the votes in now, and the margins are closing a little bit. So we're not actually seeing that big red wave. It's looking like Jon Ossoff is up pretty dramatically right now by about, looks like that's about six points right now with 10% of the votes in, and we're still bouncing around. You can see there's a lot of white space on this map. Let's take a look over at what the New York Times has to say. They have a live stream as well. Same type of results. Kelly Loeffler is looking down by about 6 percentage points, matching the other race, 10% in across the board. So they're counting nearly 400,000 votes right now. The clearest takeaway, both races really are too close to call. All right, let's take a look at some of the election stuff. So we had a court hearing today. No, this is not election stuff. All day is election stuff. This is litigation stuff that's taking place out of the state of Georgia. So Adam Classfield over at Law and Crime posted early this morning, very early, that there is going to be a federal hearing in Georgia in the case of Trump versus Kemp, but I have been told by Chambers that there will be no remote public access because the plaintiff declined. And that's kind of interesting. Why would they do that? The plaintiff, meaning Donald Trump, declined that. Donald Trump and his attorneys, they didn't want the public to have access to this stuff. And this was corroborated by a couple other people. So Adam Classfield was posting this on Twitter, and then there was a thread that he sort of created, and he said, look, I emailed this person, I called this person, I can't figure it out. Other reporters were chiming in and saying, yeah, we're getting the same story. They're shutting us out. Somebody called one of the clerks over there at the court, and they said, yeah, specifically, the plaintiff's lawyers did. And somebody said, that's Trump's side, right? And he said, yeah, the plaintiffs. So something interesting was going on. And we now have, this is the document, it looks like, that was filed. So this was, let's take a look. filed yesterday, or this was an order from the U.S. District Judge Mark Cohen. This was literally ordered yesterday. So let's see what this looks like. Civil action file in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia there in Atlanta. Donald Trump in his capacity as a candidate versus Brian Kemp, who is the Secretary of State. This order went into effect yesterday afternoon. And it says here, on December 31st, 2020, at 11:03 p.m., plaintiff, that means Donald Trump, they filed a verified complaint for injunctive and declaratory relief. They wanted the court to grant an emergency injunction. They're asking the court to do something that tells the defendants to, quote, decertify the election results for the president of the United States. They were asking the court to just decertify it, or directing the defendants to decertify it. So they're saying they want Brad Raffensperger in Georgia to take the election results that have already been certified in Georgia for the presidential race, decertify them. They also filed that same day a motion for an expedited hearing, and they wanted that to take place within 48 hours of filing the motion. And they were saying that this was so important because all the parties need to have their appeals done, and everything needs to be completed by January 6th, the day Congress is set to convene in the joint session. So we got to move on, quickly on this. They filed an expedited declaration and injunction for relief. Plaintiff, the judge says, although the plaintiff's counsel could have requested through this court's ECF, so that's the electronic court filing system, an immediate hearing over this past holiday weekend and obtained a hearing before the duty district judge, counsel did not do so. Consequently, this court was not informed of these filings until this morning, which would have been yesterday, at 9:38 when the case was assigned to the undersigned. There's no indication that the defendants have been served with a copy of the complaint or the motion. Additionally, it does not appear as though the plaintiff is seeking ex parte relief, which means Trump's team is not asking the court to grant something without the defendant's input. So Trump files the motion. They're waiting for the defense. The judge is basically saying, hey, does the defense even know about this? Did you tell Brad and company about this stuff or not? Because I can't just act without their input. One side makes a motion, the court checks with the other side and says, well, what's your position on that motion? Do you object to it or not? Presumably they would have here, and Trump and his team, they were not asking for ex parte communication. They were not asking for the court to grant them relief without the input for the defendant, because if they would have done that, that requires some additional mechanisms in the law. And they go into that here in the subsection. It looks like this footnote 1. To obtain adjunctive relief on an ex parte basis, they must do these things, right? Temporary restraining order without notice only if there are specific facts in an affidavit. The movement's attorney files in writing, it's certified, and all this stuff. Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 65B1 also talks about that. So the court is saying, look, a couple things here. You filed this motion at 11:03 p.m. on December 31st. It's New Year's Eve. And we didn't get it until January 4th, literally, because you didn't go through our electronic court filing system, which is what would have triggered the court to have addressed it sooner. They got it at 9:38 yesterday, Monday morning. So what probably happened here is Trump's team just didn't know how to file this document in the U.S. District Court. Right? They didn't use the electronic court filing. They just probably mailed it in or they stamped it. I don't know. It says they electronically filed a verified complaint. Okay, but they didn't file it for the expedited motion. So anyways, the court didn't get it for several days later. Filed on December 31st during the holiday. They didn't get it until January 4th. And so they are now saying, all right, well, hereby orders that the plaintiff serve the defendants with a copy of the complaint and the motion. The court will inform the office of the filing of the complaint, and it is further ordered that the defendants file a response to the motion no later than 9 p.m. this evening. So that would have been January 4th. It is further ordered that the hearing shall be conducted Tuesday today at 9:30 a.m. This was the hearing that took place this morning. Further details concerning the logistics shall be issued later today. And it looks like this took place this morning. Minute sheet for the proceedings held in open court on 1/5. So the federal court denies Trump's lawsuit challenging the 2020 results. Judge Mark Cohen rules from the bench saying he took an oath and cannot do an election. Written decision to follow later today. So it looks like this is what we've got so far. The attorneys present. We've got Christopher Anulewicz, representing Brad Raffensperger and Kemp. We've got Kurt Hilbert representing Donald Trump. We heard from Kurt Hilbert during that last phone call that was leaked to the Washington Post. Charlene McGowan representing Raffensperger and Kemp. Russell Willard also. So Raffensperger and Kemp have, looks like 3 attorneys. They had a motion. The motion for the preliminary injunction was denied. And there will be an order forthcoming later today. All right, so that was one version of litigation that's taking place in Georgia right now. Trump versus Kemp. They asked them to order the Secretary of State out of Georgia to decertify the November 3rd presidential election. Judge just came back out and said, no, not going to be doing that. We have talked about another lawsuit that is also taking place out of Georgia. This one we spoke about last week. It was from Majority Forward versus Ben Hill County. So let's take a look at what was going on here. This another update from Democracy Docket. They said a federal judge issues an opinion on decision to block the Muskogee County from engaging in a voter cage effort of more than 4,000 voters ahead of the Georgia Senate runoffs. Case recap, the Muskogee County agreed to hear a challenge of 4,000 voters brought by True the Vote, and the Georgia GOP Majority Forward sues to prevent the vote caging effort. Georgia federal court blocks Muskogee from proceeding with the challenges. And that last one there, the federal court blocking the Muskogee from proceeding with the challenges, that was the one that was issued, that was ordered by Judge Abrams Gardner, who is Stacey Abrams' sister. And so remember what happened in this case. There was an identification of an election committee, an election government panel in Muskogee, Georgia, that said, okay, listen, we've identified about 4,000 votes that we think are bad. These people have left the state. They've moved out of state, but their names are still on the voter registration rolls. And the way that they were identifying these is they were looking at different lists. They were looking at the Georgia registration list. They were looking at the national change of address list. Anytime you move and you update your address, so your mail gets forwarded to your residence, you fill out that change of address form on the U.S. Postal Service website, and they add you to a list. They say, hey, this person moved. And so what they're doing is they're comparing the list. They have a list of the Georgia people who have been registered to vote versus the people who moved. They cross-reference them. They can tell you these people moved, but they're still on the list. So this election commission, they were saying, well, let's clean this up. Let's deal with those 4,000 voters, because certainly if they're not living here, they shouldn't be voting here because they're not Georgians. This is a Georgia election. And they started to take action on that. So they were going to require them to vote provisionally so that they could only, vote if another vote had not been counted in their name, and so on. So they started to sort of, as they call it here, voter caging. So they're sort of engulfing them in a sort of legal limbo for their votes. Well, what happened is once that election committee started doing that in Muskogee County, they got sued. Majority Forward sued them, the Ben Hill County Board of Elections, and that lawsuit went up into the federal district court, which is where Judge Abrams Gardner sits, and she found no problems there. That was the lawsuit that we talked about last week. So let's take a look at this new filing, which is just available now. This came out late yesterday. This is from the same case in the U.S. District Court the Majority Forward versus Ben Hill County Board of Elections. The order, so this was signed by, as we can see here, Leslie Gardner. That A stands for Abrams. Okay, so that's Stacey's sister. The order here says, before the court is the plaintiff's amended complaint, which seeks both a declaratory and a preliminary injunction. So that means that the people here, Majority Forward, which they want to take that cage, that they call it, away from those 4,000 voters. They want to eliminate that. So they amended their complaint. They're suing the Ben Hill County Board of Elections, and they're saying, listen, we want this court, Miss Abrams, to declare and issue a preliminary order that prevents Ben Hill from doing something. On December 30th, this order goes on. The court held a hearing on the plaintiffs, so that's Majority Forward, for the preliminary injunction. The court entered the preliminary order granting, in part, the request for that injunction. During the hearing on the preliminary injunction, the court advised the parties that, due to the urgent nature of the case, the court might issue its order on the preliminary injunction and later enter a full order with the court's findings and conclusions. The parties did not object. This is that final order on the preliminary injunction, consistent with the federal rules. Findings of fact. So she talks about here, this judge says, during the hearing, the plaintiff, called no witnesses. Ben Hill County defendants also called no witnesses. The defendant, the Muscogee County, they called one witness, Defendant Bourne. In addition to the testimony of Defendant Bourne, the exhibits attached to the parties' respective filings were admitted during the hearing. The following are the court's findings of fact. So interesting that there was literally only one witness. The plaintiff didn't call anybody. The defense didn't call anybody. One other defendant did. And this is what the judge found. On December 14th, Ralph Russell filed a challenge to the eligibility of 4,000 registered voters, hereinafter referred to as the targeted voters in Muscogee County, to vote in the runoff elections. Russell stated, and remember, Russell, this guy, Ralph Russell, is just kind of some random guy who was just doing this data analysis, and he sent this back into the Muscogee Board of Elections, or the Ben Hill County Board of Elections, and said, hey, I've identified 4,000 people I don't think should be voting. That's kind of it. He sent it in there, and he put in his letter, he says, the grounds for my challenge are that I have evidence that there are approximately 4,033 individuals registered to vote in Muscogee County who reside outside of the state of Georgia. The information was gathered by running the Muscogee County voter registration database against the National Change of Address Registry. It goes on. There's a little break there. He says, I believe that each of the individuals named, as a result of registering their name and change of address to a location outside of Muscogee, removed to another state with the intention of making the new state their residence. Thus, each individual has lost their residence in Muscogee County, and consequently, each individual is ineligible to vote in this county. So they submitted that that was a letter that went over to the county. They acted on that. They decided, all right, that sounds pretty credible. I'm going to guess that what happened is they also compared the data, right? I'm going to presume that they just didn't get a letter from some random guy named Ralph and decided to throw out 4,000 votes. I would guess that they also checked that, corroborated it, vetted it, and then made a decision. Russell, in that letter, attached a spreadsheet containing specific information about the 4,000 voters whose eligibility he was challenging. According to Boren, the spreadsheet contained the voters' registration number, county of registration, first name, middle, maiden name, last name, and an out-of-state address for mail delivery, including city, state, and zip. And so that's what they're talking about. This is what the final order looks like. This is the result. It says here, restricted activities. It is ordered that plaintiff's request for the preliminary injunction is granted in part to the extent set forth within. So this is what the judge is finally putting on paper. The Muscogee County defendants are enjoined from upholding a challenge to any voter's eligibility solely on the basis of information in the National Change of Address Form registry. So that means the different election boards cannot uphold a challenge to any voter's eligibility just based on the fact that they're on that list. So if they've identified any of those 4,000 people, can't challenge their votes on that basis. The defendants here, the election boards, they're required to advise any voter whose eligibility has been challenged on the basis of that National Change of Address form. They got to tell them, notify them, that their eligibility to vote has been challenged because their name appeared on the registry. They can cast a provisional ballot in the January 2021 runoff election. Okay, so they still are going to be, looks like, requiring a provisional ballot. The challenge to their eligibility will not be sustained absent specific evidence of ineligibility. Such specific evidence shall not include the appearance of the voter's name or other information on the National Change of Address Registry. In the event that the board obtains such specific evidence of ineligibility, the voter will be advised of the said specific evidence by phone and in writing by January 6, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if they find some other basis for why they should not be there, they got to notify them by 5 p.m. January 6, which is the end of the day tomorrow. This order goes on, and it says here, such voter will be advised of the right to be heard and present evidence as to why the challenge to their ballot should be removed and their ballot should be counted. Specifically, voters will be advised that they can present evidence by appearing at a hearing in person or virtually at 4 p.m. on January 8th. They have to email that information to nboren@columbusga.org, or they can fax that information, it looks like, to that specific number there. They can mail that information. It's all got to be done by 5 p.m. January 8th. Because the court has already dissolved the temporary restraining order, defendants' motion to stay the temporary restraining order is denied as moot. The time from which the appeal it shall run from the entry of this order entered yesterday. So those 4,000 votes, if the election is a margin within 4,000. If one candidate wins by 4,000 or less, those 4,000 votes may come into contention pretty quickly. So we can see what happened here. The judge is really deferring towards counting votes, more votes coming in. Somebody identified that they may not even live here anymore, but the court is going to default to counting those votes. And we'll see what the margins look like. In fact, let's go take a look right now and see if we've got some new numbers coming in. So it looks like we do. It looks like the Republicans are still not in a particularly good position. 19% of the votes being reported in. We've got Kelly Loeffler, who's down by, that looks like 11 percentage points. Pretty big number there. We've also got Jon Ossoff, who's up by about another 11 percentage points. 19% of the votes are reported in. We'll take a look over here at the Washington Post, see what some of their numbers look like and what the map looks like. So we see some red counties coming in. A lot of the blue counties still pretty blue. We got 64% over in Washington. We've got 78% over here in Baldwin. But the big sort of suburbs around Atlanta, nothing has come in yet. Or about 25%, 21, 852 total votes. So it's still pretty wide open. Their numbers are also sort of mirroring what we just saw over on the New York Times. So 53.8%, 46.2, 54.1 for Warnock, and another 45.9 for Loeffler. Let's see here. We've got some super chats that looks like coming in here. We've got one from AL, says, ID wasn't suppression. Basic ID is under $20. Required to work. Beer, cigarettes. In many states, it's free. If you're homeless, yeah, it's not worth the fraud. I totally agree with that, AL. I think that's obvious. You know, you need an identification card to do anything, really. And so to require that you go get that in order to go vote, just so that we can make sure that you are who you say you are, I think that's perfectly reasonable. We had another super chat come in from Lava Java Lava, says here, can Trump start a court motion against Georgia if a motion is already started against Trump for making a phone call for election tampering? So I see what you're saying. So Lava, I think, is asking can Trump start a motion if they are moving against him already? So I think Lava, what they're, if some of what the headlines we talked about yesterday are accurate, that they're sort of investigating this thing as a potential crime, well, then, yeah, that would be something that would take the form of a formal complaint against Donald Trump. So if he's charged with a crime for having a phone call, which, by the way, when you have a meeting to talk about something, you normally will set the subject of that meeting, and then you'll talk about that subject in the meeting. So in criminal law, for example, if we have a settlement conference where we're going to talk about our client who's been charged with the crime and the crime that the prosecutor is going to be charging our client with, we're going to talk about, guess what? The crime. Pretty normal. If you're getting a divorce, you're going to talk about what? A division of assets. If you are in a child custody proceeding, you're probably going to talk about child custody. Okay, so in this context, yesterday or over the weekend, Donald Trump was meeting with his election lawyers, several of them, who were also having a conversation with another side, Brad Raffensperger, and his election operations as the chief operator of the elections in Georgia. He also had his election attorneys on the phone. They had a meeting to talk about the election, and so they talked about votes. Isn't that obvious? Somehow that's groundbreaking news. They talked about the deficit of the votes. They talked about how many Trump needs to win in order to change, about the claims, about the remedies. Pretty obvious stuff. So if they wanted to charge him with a crime for that, I don't see any basis for it. I don't think there was a violation of the law at all. But if they did, Lava, your question is, can he sort of use that to move against them in some mechanism? Can he sort of incriminate himself in order for them to open up a case against him so that he could use some legal maneuvers in order to get access to more information or something to that effect? Sort of the same strategy that Sidney Powell is allegedly using, right? Going out there, making a bunch of claims against Dominion so that when Dominion sues her now for defamation or for libel or whatever they're going to sue her for, then her argument is perfect. Now I can use that to get discovery. I can open up their books. I can go get access to the material that they've been hiding from me for so long. So, I understand the context of the question, but I just don't think that that is pertinent. If they did decide to charge Donald Trump, it would be probably in federal court, maybe state court, I don't know, but it would be something that I think would be inconsequential in terms of helping Trump. So if the idea here is that he was sort of doing this strategically in order to incriminate himself, to open the door and the possibility of something else, I don't think that that's particularly likely. All right, let's take another look over at some of the results. So we're back over here. We've got 20% of the votes counted. Margins closing dramatically. All right, big difference here. We've got this shrunk massively. So the last time we talked, Perdue was down by about 11 points. Loeffler was down by 11 points. Now Loeffler's down by 4 points. Same story over there with Perdue. Let's take a look over here at the New York Times. Where is the map? I think that's down here. All right, so coming in, looks like some more red counties. Those numbers are climbing 100%. The map is looking more and more red. Another one just from Atlanta just came in. 68% has been counted in Henry, and Jon Ossoff is up pretty dramatically. And so we'll check back in on those. We've got another super chat just coming in from Scotch. He says, I have been thinking heavily about Jovan Pulitzer's briefing about the physical ballots. Those ballots were designed by someone and scanners had to be calibrated. Why doesn't someone do a chain of custody audit? Scotch, it's a great question. And I think this is sort of, if you listen to the full call, the full transcript, that Donald Trump was, when he was on that call, his attorneys, and I think her name was Cleta, she was basically asking for some of that. They've been saying for a long time that they've been asking Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger for data, for information. And in the transcript, we talked about some of this yesterday, they were asking for it. They're saying, hey, listen, if you can just send some of this stuff over to us, maybe we can clear some of this up. Donald Trump said, we have 24,000 votes that we think are questionable. We need some information to verify those. Can we just double check those with your numbers? And the Georgia Secretary of State, their response essentially was, yeah, we'll see what we can do. I mean, we'll reach out to our attorneys. We'll try to set something up, but we don't think we don't think we have to give you any of that stuff. Is sort of how I interpreted it. And they talked about some of that. I think legally we don't have to give you that stuff. And they may very well be right. I don't know the specifics of Georgia's sort of public records law and whether they do have to disclose that stuff. I think it's a huge mistake for them to not modify. I'm in favor of more disclosure, more transparency. Let's see. Open it up. This is a public election. All of this data should be available for anybody to scrutinize. In my mind, I don't know why they have to hide this stuff. Okay, it's the same criticism I have with a lot of the cops, with law enforcement. We want access to their personnel files. Why do they flush them down the toilets every 5 years so that we don't see anything that happened older than 5 years? Why do they do that? If they stand by the integrity of their officers, why can't we see the whole file? Well, because they don't want us to see the stuff in there. They want, it's something that our unions here negotiate with the cities when they enter into their contracts. The police unions, they go and they have conversations with the city council and they say, listen, if you want a police force here, these are our terms. We don't want personnel files going back for 20 years. You got to get rid of them after 5. So city council says, yeah, well, we need the Phoenix police, pretty big police department here. So sure, we'll negotiate that term in. Those police records just go into the ether. We never see them again. So same situation here, right? If Brad Raffensperger and his team are so confident with this stuff, why don't they just give the data? They're not, from what I read in that transcript, they weren't asking them to sort of redo the election or an audit. The Trump's attorneys were just saying, just give us a little bit more information, and they refused to do that. Thanks, Scotch. I would agree. I would like to see more details, a lot more information about some of this stuff. We've got some other super chats coming in. This one from Elanchus Speaks says Trump was told the machines were not moved or altered, or that any ballots were shredded, and still, without any comment from his counsel, that there was evidence to the contrary that insisted that he won. And yeah, this kind of is a piggybacking off Scotch's comments, and I would agree with this. And it's funny, I posted this on Twitter late last night. There was we covered this, I think it was on November 18th. One of Lynn Wood's, as sort of loony as he has gotten these past 2 months, he is one of his initial lawsuits that was filed on the 17th or the 18th. I can't remember. I think it might have been filed on the 17th. But he had two affidavits, one from a woman named Myra Romero and another one from a woman named Susan Voiles. And I posted snippets of their affidavits from November 17th, where they said, and these were two, I think, Georgia election workers. I think Susan has since been fired for being a whistleblower, but she said in her affidavits that they saw these pristine ballots, sort of this printed ballot theory that Jovan was talking about for a long time during his appearance in front of the Georgia Senate legislature. He was saying, look, we can go identify these ballots look like they've been printed and the bubbles were already filled in. I just need access to the documents. I need to go look at them because I'm going to run them through this computer algorithm, through this software that's going to tell me how many times they've been folded and whether or not they've actually been transported in the mail. We can identify if this was sort of a legitimately handled ballot, right? If you get a ballot, it was printed, it was shoved in an envelope, it was sent to your house, you opened it, you probably threw it around the kitchen for a certain period of time, put it back in, you put it back in the mail, your U.S. Postal Service guy picked it up, it got bundled around with a bunch of other letters and envelopes until it got sorted through the Postal Service. They can tell that it was sorted through there, then it went from there to the collections office and they counted it, they had to open it up, and you can track all of that stuff. There's a forensic way to identify that activity on the paper ballot. And so Jovan was just saying, I just want to see it. But they're not giving them any of that information. And why is that? And why are we as a public accepting of that? Why don't we have answers to all of these questions? I hope that we get them. We'll see if there are any changes prior to the next election, because in my mind, this stuff is going to be very, very repeatable. We have another one from Chill Bill says, with Trump's lifelong experience in courts and lawsuits, is it even plausible that these failed legal moves are without cause? With Trump's lifelong experience in courts, is it even plausible that these failed legal moves are without cause? Chill Bill, it's hard for me to understand that. I don't know what sort of strategic benefit they would get by, filing a document through the wrong mechanism. I think probably what's happening here is that you've just got so much chaos around the litigation that's taking place in the country that they just are a little bit out of sorts. I've said this a long time, much to my dismay. I think that the Republicans were very, very, very caught off guard in this election, at least legally. You've got the democracy docket. You've got Mark Elias. These people they have just a war room set up for lawsuits. And you can go follow Mark Elias on Twitter. He posts every night, hey, we're winning. Joe Biden's going to get elected. Joe Biden's going to get inaugurated on the 20th. Trump started the day today 1-60 in court. He ended it 1-61. Yay for Joe Biden. Yay for America. Down with Trump, right? And he's sort of the godfather masterminding a lot of these election lawsuits that are taking place around the country. And he's doing a damn good job managing it. He's just running circles around the Republicans. And so the Republicans are filing lawsuits. They're trying to, get in and issue responses and take cases to the Supreme Court and file, lawsuits in district court and so on. And they're just disorganized. They're sort of outclassed from a legal perspective. So, very interesting that they have been caught so flat-footed, but we'll see if that changes down the road. I would say, Chill Bill, that my sort of instinct is that it's probably just bad lawyering. It's probably just, simple errors that are taking place. All right, we've got some more coming in. We've got another one from Wolfgang Deo, who says, I'm out. Wolfgang says, I don't want to be watching in case things go bad. Saw the slippery slope years ago, forced down along it because I'm optimistic. So Wolfgang, I don't want you to leave, my friend, but if you have to for your own sanity, I get it. Certainly don't subject yourself to this election stuff if it's going to be causing you some dismay. So that was from our friend over Wolfgang. Good to see you, Wolfgang. We have Scotch chiming in again. Rob, thanks for that response. The creation of the election ballots had to be funded with taxpayers' money, so there has to be a paper trail. Yeah, right. You would think so. And I read in Donald Trump's transcript that he was saying that they were going to, that they were. He got news that they were shredding ballots. Raffensperger and co. said That's not the case at all. We have K. Bean who says, are they still using the Dominion machines in Georgia? I think so. I mean, I don't think that they've changed anything. And we even saw in that Senate hearing that Jovan Pulitzer said he hacked into one of the same poll watching machines. He literally, like, in front of everybody, and the senators just said, that's curious. Thanks for sharing. Next witness. Do we have somebody else? Next witness? They just kind of glossed right over it. So, yeah, I don't think anything has changed, right? Nothing has changed in Georgia. They say their election was fine. They say nothing needs to be modified, and they're just going to run the same election they did last time. We'll see how that turns out. Let's check back in on the numbers. We've got 28% of the votes have been counted, and the margins are still favoring the Democrats pretty clearly. 52% for Warnock to 47% down there for Loeffler. Looks like a margin of about 70,000 votes with 28% counted in. There's looks like 3.1 million ballots left to be counted. Oh, look, they did the math for me. Oh, this is amazing. The Washington Post delivers. They're just doing the math for us right here on the fly. 56,000 votes. Jon Ossoff is up. And then we've got 64,000 votes. Warnock is up. And so, this can be concerning if you're a Republican and you're saying, we were looking at that other statement that said, beware of the brace yourself for the GOP lead at the beginning of the night. Now, now it's not looking like that. So that might be a bad indicator for them. But again, still pretty early. Looking at the maps, we see a lot of red. But a lot of these big counties around Georgia around Atlanta are still very, very low in terms of the volume of votes in. 21% in, 27% in. In Fulton, we've got 21% in. Fulton was the county we had all those problems. Cobb County is a big county, 31% of those votes in. And you would just suspect that a lot of these surrounding counties are going to go massively for the Democrats, but we will see. We've got another one coming in here from Obina. IB says, always catching the show late. Frowny, frowny, frowny face. But as always, great show and wonderful content. Thanks, Obina. I appreciate that. Thanks for being here. And you can always rewind the show. Not a big deal. I mean, I know it hurts. It feels a little bit empty when you're not here. I feel it. But you can always rewind it and catch us later. We're glad that you made it. Better late than never, as they say. There was also some interesting information about this U.S. attorney, this guy by the name of Pack. He was appointed one of the top federal prosecutors in northern Georgia by President Donald Trump. He's reportedly making history as the first ever Korean American to hold the position of a U.S. attorney. That's pretty cool. He previously served 6 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, representing a portion of Gwinnett County, and he's widely seen as a rising star in the Republican Party. But he resigned unexpectedly. It is unclear what those unforeseen circumstances were, in quotes, that might have been. Pack did not return a message seeking comment. There was this was an interesting case. This is a U.S. attorney who is, in a prestigious position in Georgia, and he just resigns unexpectedly. That doesn't really happen for U.S. attorneys. Usually the U.S. attorney it's a career path. They're in there for 20 years and they're working their way up before they run for something, right? For some office somewhere. And so he just resigned. Many people are saying, well, maybe this has to do with that leaked phone call that came out in Georgia. Maybe this is a little bit of a coincidence. If a U.S. attorney is going to be asked to prosecute, let's say a Republican U.S. attorney who's got some political ambitions, if he's going to be asked to prosecute an outgoing president, that's a problem. Maybe this guy's just pulling the ejection cord and bailing out of there before that comes across his table. On Sunday, an audio recording became public of a conversation between Trump and his allies, Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, in which Trump pressured the state's top election officials to help him, quote, find enough votes, which, again, of course, they're going to talk about votes in a settlement conference about an election. There's nothing else to talk about. They can't talk about their grandchildren. They can't talk about how their New Year's Eve party was. They can't talk about, what the latest episode on whatever is. They're there to talk about the election. Of course, they're going to talk about votes. On the recording, Trump references a never Trumper U.S. attorney there. Is that a reference to Pack? It's unclear if it is, but Atlanta and Fulton County are within the Northern District of Georgia, and in the recording, Trump talks repeatedly of debunked, according to them, accusations of electoral fraud in Georgia, including in Fulton. So does one thing have anything to do with the other? Who knows? We don't know. Okay, cool. Hey, look, we've got some, Faith is clipping some of the super chats that looks like I missed. We have one here from Wolfgang Deo back in the house, says, hey, y'all, missed you yesterday. Was captivated. The Holy Spirit whisked away. A Parks COVID sign. Wild. About 40 feet. Brief airtime. Wild. 40. That is wild. I mean, a Parks COVID sign. 40 feet in the air. Wolfgang, if you got that on video, my friend, that's good filmmaking. I would love to see a COVID sign just flying off into the distance, never to be seen again. It's almost poetry. Should be at the beginning of a movie like American Beauty or something like that, right? Just very beautiful. Whisked away into the afterlife. Thanks, Wolfgang. Wolfgang's back out again. He says, so if things don't work out this week, does anyone else have plans to leave? I like to figure things out on the spot like a ninja. A gods. Amen. A woman. A non-binary pronoun. May we all rest in peace. We've got some others coming in. Sasha Shisha, can you please explain the path to win for Trump? Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So it's pretty simple at this point. I don't think there are many of them. What happens tomorrow is kind of everything. A lot of eggs in the basket tomorrow. And tomorrow may not be done tomorrow. It could be, right? It could be pretty quick and dry, or it could just drag on and on and on. We don't know. But here is the nuts and bolts of it. Currently, Joe Biden has 306 electoral votes. In order for him to not win on that, something has to be done about those votes. They got to be removed down. He's got to be kept under the 270 threshold. If you're over 270, they're all certified, all the votes count, he's going to win the presidency. Okay, so coming into the joint session tomorrow, he's looking pretty good. Very good. Okay, more than pretty good, very, very good. And so what would have to happen, and what is sort of already in motion, is that when the votes are being counted by Vice President Mike Pence, there's a big question here about what he can do with the votes. Okay, we've talked about some of these lawsuits. We talked about Louis Gohmert. We talked about whether Mike Pence would even want to sort of throw votes out. Because remember, there's a conversation being had about what votes should count from the states that are being contested. So Arizona, we sent in a certified slate of electoral votes. Our legislature, went through, the governor certified them. Those were all sent in. But our GOP also went through a different ceremony, and they cast their own electoral votes because they say that the other ones were invalid. They were fraudulent. So 2 sets of votes, electoral votes, are going into the United States Congress. One for Trump, one for Joe Biden. The Biden ones are certified, the Trumps are not. And that same scenario has happened in a number of states around the country. So the question was, all right, well, now when Mike Pence, who's the person who literally the vice president of the Senate, the vice president of the country is the president of the Senate, Mike Pence will be opening the votes. And so the question was, can he count whatever slate of ballots that he wants, whatever slates of certificates of ascertainment? Can he just decide on that? That's what Rep. Louis Gohmert was saying he could do. They were saying, yeah, he can easily decide that. And we went through the analysis and we're like, I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. Miss Faith just sent me a message about Vice President Pence. And so the question here was, would he even do that? Even if he did have the power, which I don't necessarily think he does, but let's just sort of frame it out a little bit. If Mike Pence wants to just, think about this in the future. Okay, next, let's fast forward in 4 years. We have Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the president of the Senate. If she's just counting votes and she can just pick whatever slate of electors she wants, she's the most powerful person in the country. She gets to decide the president. Mike Pence would get to decide the president if they can just pick whatever ballots they want to count. So I don't think that is allowed. And it looks like, based on Twitter here today, we see that Kyle Becker, who is a blue check mark, this guy looks like he's over from he's an independent journalist over with Fox News. So we're just checking on that. We will need this to be verified by Mike Pence since this came from a CNN source. Okay, he says, breaking the Electoral College, Vice President Pence reportedly told President Trump that he doesn't have the power to unilaterally overturn the 2020 election. And so it looks like they're going to be seeing if they can confirm that. And I don't think that he does have the power to do that. He has the ability to count them, but what would happen next is the Congress then gets to object to the votes. So Mike Pence opens up Arizona. I think Arizona is going to be the first contested state on there, and I saw a headline that Ted Cruz is going to object to that. So Arizona, I think we have 11 electoral votes. I'm not positive about that, but whatever our number of votes are, those votes, if they're objected to when they're counting. So they'll go Alaska. Any contest there? No objections. Their votes count. They go to Alabama. Same thing. Any questions there? Nope. Those votes are good. Those all go to Trump. Alaska all go to Trump. Arizona pops up. Well, those are supposed to be going to Biden. So now Ted Cruz and some of the senators are going to be joining a lot of the House representatives in Congress, and they're going to be objecting to Arizona's votes. So now, as they're counting the totals, Arizona's bucket of votes, electoral votes, goes into debate into the various houses, one in the Senate, one in the House. They have a conversation about it. A debate should be limited to about 2 hours. Each member gets like 5 minutes to speak. Then they have a floor vote. In the Senate, they'll decide, should we throw out Arizona's votes? If 51 senators vote yes to throw out Arizona's votes, okay, those votes are gone from the Senate. But the House also has to join them. So if the House votes to keep those votes, because the House is controlled by the Democrats, they have more Democrats than Republicans. So if they have a floor vote and they vote to keep Arizona's votes, those votes stay. Okay, and that same process is going to have to be repeated over and over. So Trump and his team, they're going to be able to present evidence tomorrow, presumably during that 2-hour window of debate. If they present enough evidence to sort of shake enough members of Congress out of their stupor and go and vote in favor of the president, that's the path. So then the House of Representatives would also vote to throw out Arizona's votes. Arizona's gone. Joe Biden is dropped under the 306. Down under 300. The next state up, what is it going to be? Georgia. Georgia comes up, same process. If those votes get thrown out, okay, Joe Biden drops down even more electoral votes. They got to find another state. Then they got, Michigan next. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada. If he gets under the 270 threshold, at that point in time, the House of Representatives decides via a contingent election who the next president is. One vote, one state. Trump has more states. President Trump gets another term. It's a long shot. Total long shot. I don't expect it to happen, but we will see. I think that is the only path that is left, Sasha. Thanks for the super chat. We have another one from Sharon. Good to see you, Sharon. She says, what do you think of the situation in D.C. with Pennsylvania asking to decertify their electoral votes? What about Pence's role? Plus, you have the objection. So we kind of just talked all about that, Sharon. I don't know much about. So there is a situation where I've heard that a number of different state legislatures are sort of moving to decertify their own votes. I think that's happening in Pennsylvania. I think that's also happening in Wisconsin. But I don't think that it's going to have any impact tomorrow. The electoral votes have already been certified. They're probably already in the inbox in the joint session in the House of Representatives. And so I think if they wanted to decertify those, I don't think there's any time that they're going to get that done prior to tomorrow. We'll see. Tomorrow is going to be sort of a free-for-all. There's going to be a lot of information flying around. We're going to try to make the best out of it, but it is going to be a lot. Thanks, Sharon. Good to see you. We have Address Lynn Wood via Twitter claimed the world's top intelligence agencies control the world elites by blackmailing them and raping and killing children. So, Lynn Wood, I think has kind of gone into the deep end a little bit. I don't really know what the hell he is doing with a lot of these statements. I mean, bizarre statements. I have no doubt in my mind that there are evil people in this world, but some of the claims that he's making about some of the people, in positions of power, guys that have had their entire lives vetted top to bottom, people like John Roberts, in my mind is just, without any evidence, without a shred of evidence, these are just sort of hysterical lunacy type claims, right? You can't just get out there and say this stuff without some evidence. And I'm getting really tired of like this tick, 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 tick tock, drip, 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 oh, it's coming at some point. I'm going to unveil this grand conspiracy. Yeah, we've been doing that for like 2 months now. Okay, 2 months. Tomorrow's the end of the line. Tomorrow's when they're counting the votes. So these people, put up, man, or shut up, because what are you doing? You're making all lawyers look like idiots. So Lynn Wood, I wouldn't take any credibility in any of those things. I mean, I know he's got a very, very active fan base, and a lot of people are listening to guys like Lynn Wood and others who are promising them a light at the end of the tunnel. But, it's just talk, and it's bizarre talk, and I think it's very, He's free to say it, right? I'm a sort of a free speech absolutist in many ways. He's free to say it. We're also free to judge it. And my criticism of him has been, hey, aren't you filing lawsuits in front of the Supreme Court, like 4 of them? You need the judges to accept the case, to grant certiorari, and to rule in your favor. And then you need them to do it quickly. So when you start calling the Chief Justice a rapist and a pedophile, and you say, hey, maybe you should stop traveling to Epstein's Island and trafficking children from England, that's not a good look. That's not how you win cases in court, by calling the judge a rapist and a pedophile. So, the whole thing to me feels very destructive in many ways. I'm not sure what is happening there. If you wanted to really wreck any of the Trump momentum, Trump's sort of movement, you would put somebody like Linwood smack dab in the middle of it. You'd have them build some credibility for a certain period of time, and then you'd have them just take a wrecking ball to everything, that all of the goodwill that they've built up over a period of time. And that seems to me what he's doing, right? Some of his claims, I just talked about his lawsuit from November 17th, which was a pretty decent lawsuit. And it had some good information, some good evidence. One of the first lawsuits out of the gates. He put together a nice document with a lot of affidavits. Fast forward 2 months, and he's talking about, pedophile, rape, blackmail organization and things like that. I mean, he's gone just totally off the deep end. And so, unfortunately, quite frankly, I'm not sure that the guy's well. I try not to be too hard on him, because he may literally have something going on with him. Like, you can't rule that possibility out with some of the claims. Or maybe he's exactly right, and there's this pedophile ring that's running the world. I have no idea. But we need more evidence from Linwood on that if he's going to stand by those claims. We have Sasha Sisha, who says over here, hi, Miss Faith and Rob. Also, did you see how Jovan Pulitzer's team member were attacked in a drive-by shooting could have ended if Donald Trump's team were given access? No, I did not see that. Jovan Pulitzer and his team had a drive-by shooting. There's a lot of this stuff going on. Josh Hawley last night just had some information, or just had a bunch of Antifa members, I think, banging down his doors at his house. Insane. We had Mitch McConnell had his house ambushed. We had Nancy Pelosi had her house ambushed. People are pretty upset about this stuff. Don't know about that drive-by shooting for Jovan. Hope everybody's okay. We have another one from James Hadd, who says the system continually fails conservatives from top to bottom because we fight with morals and ethics. What other choice do we have but civil war? So, a civil war would be horrendous. Okay, the Civil War in American history was the most bloody war we've ever had. Hundreds of thousands of people died. We don't want anything like that. If anything, maybe we have a little friendly secession. Maybe Texas just says, all right, enough of this stuff. I'm out. Peace. And the Californians say, good. We don't want those idiot Texans in this country anyways. And so Texas and California just agree to the split, and we just kind of divide the country up, right? Not a good idea. I'm not hopeful that happens. But, if it's going to be sort of a secession type of a conversation, that would be something that would be more reasonable than a civil war. So that's just another option. Okay, rather than taking your guns and pitchforks and going and shooting your neighbors, maybe we just have a nice, peaceful secession transition out. I was talking to our incredible moderator, Mr. Ma, before the show about some other places in the countries and places in Canada, and we kind of came to the conclusion that every country has one state that wants to secede. We all have that one kid in class, and so Texas is a good option for that. Which, depending on what happens here, if the Democrats take control of the House, which they already have, they take control of the Senate, which they may get according to these numbers, and they also pack the courts, we're going to be living in a one-party rule for the foreseeable future, probably for the rest of our lives, right? Which would be a concern. So at that point in time, maybe Texas sounds pretty good. The United State of Texas could be good. The Republicans here, they're going to have to get on their game. I think they got caught flat-footed. I've said that many times, but the Republicans have to just step it up. Another one from Turd Ferguson says, can you comment on the power of the VP to select alternate or conflicting elector slates vis-a-vis Jefferson 1801, Hayes Tilden 1876, and Nixon in 1971? So I'll have to take a look at all of those specific instances. I know I can speak on it loosely, but Turd not too specifically. We have also an originalist reason for specifying involvement of the executive branch through the VP if purely a ceremonial role. Jefferson, of all people, voted himself into office with no real objections recorded. Yeah, so yes, Turd, this is a very important point, and we spent some time on this yesterday talking through the rules. We spent literally time talking about U.S. Code Section 15, which is a part of the Electoral Count Act, which gives us some pretty definitive instructions on how this stuff works. And, my point for a long time has always been that the rules matter. The rules matter, right? They're written for a reason. This act was modified in 1948, and we can't just take away the power of those people, those men and women, those senators and House representatives who passed this into law. They did so for a reason. And one of the things they put in there was that the vice president has some authority to count the votes. Right? They didn't give us much detail on that, which is why Representative Louis Gohmert was suing to try to clarify what that actually means. Right? Is the vice president literally just a ceremonial figurehead where he just opens the votes and hands them to the tellers? Or is there some sort of discretion there where he can say these votes were not counted regularly? It sounds like, according to Mr. Turd Ferguson, that they've got, he's got some examples. Jefferson, 1801, Hayes-Tilden, 1876, Nixon in 1961. And we talked about, I think, the Nixon case and maybe Hayes-Tilden, 1876. But this was a point that Ted Cruz also brought up, and I played a clip from him yesterday, and he made the same point you did. He said, if the vice president was just somebody to just open the envelopes, we could have a clerk do that. We could hire an intern to do that, right? It's not really that important, other than we have the vice president do it. So, it's a tricky question. I think there's a hole in the law. I think there's a hole in the rules. You can make good arguments both ways. My only concern with giving Vice President Pence more power on this topic is that it's going to be used by the other side in 4 years. So you just got to live with that. If you're going to pass a rule, you got to be able to live with it. If the Republicans are going to be objecting tomorrow, which they will, get ready for the Democrats to do it in 4 years. You're not going to see me back here 4 years from now saying these Democrats, they should not object. This is ridiculous. They're treasonous and seditious. No, I'll be back here saying, yeah, they should do it, right? If they think that this was fraudulent, they should do it. It's in the rules. Don't like the rules, change the rules. Okay, but we can't pass one set of laws for us when our guy's in power and a different set when somebody else is in power. It's the same rules. So if Mike Pence has that sort of unbridled authority to just decide, there's going to be a period in time when a Democrat does that. And are you okay with that? I'm not particularly. I think it makes more sense to not make that person the most powerful person in the world when it comes to selecting the next president, and instead have that process hashed out in the body of Congress. See what happens tomorrow. Thanks, T. Ferguson. Appreciate it. We have another one from Ryan Renard, who says Pence will do the right thing 4 more years. We'll see tomorrow. I'm a little bit skeptical. Mike Pence is sort of a straight and narrow, by the book, follow the rules kind of guy. I don't expect any fireworks from him tomorrow. I really don't. It'd be fun, but I just don't expect it. We have Rajesh Shakar, who says, Mo Brooks tweets so far 36 House members objecting all 7 states and Cruz, Arizona, Hawley, Pennsylvania, Loeffler, Georgia, signed for 3 individual states. Now others backing away. Interesting. Yeah, so it's sort of coming to fruition. They're going to be detailing who's taking what states and how that's going to be coordinated. And so we'll see tomorrow. It looks like, I think that would be enough. Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. If you add up those votes and all of those votes are thrown out, then Joe Biden, I think, if the math adds up, would be under the 306. That would trigger the contingent election. So they would need to be successful in all 3 of those states. We've got some other super chats coming in. Lynn Wood and his serious allegations and his "if I die" tweet. Woo! Tonight will end tonight while in line at the store, a magazine with JOEB as the 46 no brand name on the magazine. Interesting. So Lynn Wood, he's probably going off right now. I don't know what he's saying. Maybe we'll take a look and see what some of that looks like. But Eagle Eye Gardens is also standing in line at a store with Joe Biden as a 46 no brand name on the magazine. Interesting. Another one coming in from Scotch. Do you think the evidence during the electoral challenge tomorrow will be related to vulnerability that was discovered by Jovan Pulitzer in Georgia? Yeah, I think so. So there's going to be a whole slate of lawsuits, unless this is a blowout, which we should take a look and see. It's about that time. It's 6:30. let's see what some of these numbers are looking like again in Georgia. Get a little update on what the race looks like. And here we go. 44% are in, and we got some margins actually increasing. So the Republicans are not doing so well. 44% of the votes cast, they've been counted here. We got Ossoff, who's up 1 million votes, difference there of 155,000. So the last time we checked, he was about 60,000 up. He's now over more than doubled that, up by 155,000. Then we've got Loeffler, who is down. She's the GOP senator, 54% to 45.6%. She's also down by 169,000 votes with 2.4 million ballots left to be counted. And that is because some of these other counties surrounding Atlanta are coming in, right? So we see here 70% in Henry County, right outside Atlanta, 74% out of Clayton. We've got Fulton, which is a big one, reporting 82% in there. We've got Douglas, 77%. And it looks like DeKalb, Gwinnett, and where is Cobb County? Where the hell did that go? All right, Cobb. There's Cobb. Nope, there's Cobb County. That one's still missing a lot, and Jon Ossoff is up, so 31% over there. So as the big counties surrounding Atlanta come in, they're all going to be blue, and you can still see there are a lot of other counties that should come from the red parts of Georgia are just not in yet. So that number may continue to close. 44% of those votes counted thus far. Let's take a look at Twitter. Let's see what Lynn Wood is up to, because we had some comments about him. Lynn Wood is also talking. So he posted a couple hours ago, if real Donald Trump appointed Sidney Powell special prosecutor to investigate the election fraud, she'd have answers on the president's desk within 7 to 10 days. All right, another one. My lawsuit to join the Georgia Senate runoff was not heard by SCOTUS in time to stop the steal. I chose to not knowingly vote in a fraudulent election. So there again, he's sort of promoting the idea that you should not be voting. Maybe I will be proven wrong, but I think Georgia runoff is rigged for Loeffler and Ossoff to win. Claim will be made that Loeffler win shows no fraud. Nonsense. More fraud in Georgia now than on 11/3. That's according to Mr. Wood. All right, so about 44% of the votes in. We'll check back in a little bit. Let's take a look and see here. So Sach says, do you think evidence during the electoral challenge tomorrow will be related to the vulnerability that was discovered by Jovan Pulitzer in Georgia? And yeah, probably. I mean, you would think that there would be zero fraud in this election, right? The eyes of the entire country are down on this state right now. They have been for the last 2 months, really. Trump has made Georgia sort of the centerpiece of his complaints about the election. And you would imagine that they just wouldn't be able to get away with it right now, but who knows? So the Jovan objection was about the idea that these ballots were pre-printed, that they already had them filled out for Joe Biden. They were just running them through the machines. So I would love Jovan to get access to that stuff. I would love to see what his analysis looks like, because I was very impressed by his presentation in front of the Senate. All right, we got John McLean in the House, who says, why is it so much effort to overturn Georgia when that isn't enough to take Biden below 270? And so, what I think they've been trying to do here strategically is pick Georgia off because it's a small margin, very small. I think just 12,000 votes. Or 11. Donald Trump said, I just need to find 11,000 votes, right? And so that's a very small margin. The margin in Michigan is way bigger. The margin in Pennsylvania is also bigger. I think 50,000. Michigan's like something like 140,000. And the numbers are bigger. Wisconsin might be the only one that's close. So Georgia is sort of a must flip, right? They have to get that one. And it's close. And there's a lot of kind of malfeasance that we've identified going on there. So I think the strategy was to identify one state, flip that one state, and that's going to be the first domino. It's going to sort of open the floodgates, sort of like Josh Hawley objected to the Senate, in the Senate, saying, I'm going to object to the votes. And then after that first domino tipped, we had a lot of other senators sort of rush into the fold. Right now we have Tuberville. Looks like we got Loeffler. Looks like we've got Cruz and some others. So I think that's what Trump's team was trying to do. If they can flip Georgia, they can really undermine the credibility of the national election. And a lot of people would be scratching their heads, right? It would show a victory in a small battle that might change the tide of the war. We've got Charles Argo, who says, where are the Secret Service who study counterfeit paper? Can't Trump instruct them to assist Pulitzer? So I thought that same thing. The Secret Service is responsible for counting or for checking counterfeit money. Right? They investigate those. It's sort of in their purview. But I don't know if they can extend that if they can increase their jurisdiction beyond the currency into other areas. Just because they could probably go in and tell you definitively one way or the other doesn't mean they have the power to do that. Right? A lot of these government agencies have jurisdictional limits, and for good reason. You don't want one area of the government investigating all of the other areas of government just because they can. You want to carve out specific roles and limit their power. So, the Secret Service is probably limited. They probably can't get involved in the elections. I'm sure they're highly capable and they could probably figure this out in the blink of an eye. But they don't have the legal authority to get in there and do it. We have another one from the White Buffalo who says, what is your opinion on the opinion of counsel to Mike Pence from Brian C. Relly, a constitutional attorney? So I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that opinion of Brian Relly, a constitutional attorney. If his opinion was that Mike Pence doesn't have the legal authority to just pick whatever version of electors he wants, I think there's probably a good argument for that, right? That would essentially make him the de facto voter. Everybody in the country would vote, but ultimately whatever Mike Pence decides to do is the final decision. And that just doesn't sit well. I don't think that is how the law reads. So I would be in disagreement about that. If there is, if he's pointing to other precedents, sort of like what Turd Ferguson was mentioning there, there actually might be an argument for that. But the courts have not found that to be the case. And it sounds like Mike Pence doesn't want that to be the case either, which is why we just haven't spent a lot of time on that argument. Now, if we are in the middle of it tomorrow and Mike Pence is just frisbeeing envelopes right back at these senators, just saying, here you go. Yeah, well, here's your BS votes from California. Zing, and zings him with a Biden certificate of ascertainment. Zings, Chuck Schumer right between the eyeballs with Pennsylvania's fraudulent electors. Just flicks it right in his face, right? That's not going to happen tomorrow. Mike Pence is probably just going to open them without much ado about anything and just pass them off to the tellers. They're going to count them. It's going to be up to the senators and the House representatives to object and run with those objections. We have another one from Elanchus Speaks, who says, Gabriel Sterling has already debunked the pristine ballot claim. Electronic ballots sent by military are not folded. Read the New York Times Georgia election fraud. Yeah, so I saw that, but just because that is one plausible explanation doesn't mean that is the explanation. I understand the argument, the idea here that you could have a potential of ballots that are not folded, like military ballots, right? If they are sort of all put in a stack overseas. I never served in the military, so I don't know how voting works. But if you're overseas and you have a voting booth over there, and they have their own procedures to make sure that the people who are who they say they are, they have to have some sort of some procedure over there for voting. And so if they're overseas and they vote, what do they do with those ballots? Do they just stack them all up in a big box? So they're not folded and put in the mail and circled around, shuffled through the postal service. They just transport it in a big box, and that box ends up on a stack somewhere. And that stack somewhere happened to be Susan Voiles, the affidavit that was filed in Lynn Wood's lawsuit. And she says, these look weird. I've been doing this for 20 years, was in her affidavit. I've been doing this for a long time. I've never seen anything quite like this. She could be wrong, right? She totally could be wrong. She could have just never handled the military absentee ballot pile before. Or maybe she knew all about that and she recognized these were not military absentee ballots, right? The circles were filled in too nicely or whatever the claims are. So there are multiple explanations for all of this stuff. There's a claim, there's a debunk of the debunk, and then the debunkers debunk the debunkers. It just goes around and around and around. And so, the New York Times has their posts. Jovan has his. Everybody's got their interpretation on this stuff. What would have been really excellent if one of the courts would have let this litigation happen in an open forum, like in a court of law, so that there could be cross-examinations. People could go on the record. We could, have the ballots come in, have experts for both sides, for Trump's people and the other side, have a conversation about this stuff. Right now, we haven't. The courts largely have dismissed these claims on latches, mootness, ripeness, standing, all of these sort of pre-file issues. Almost nothing has gone on the merits on a lot of these claims. But people want to, and Elanchus, I understand what you're doing, but this is the New York Times. They're sort of looked at as the fact checker gatekeeper. I don't buy the New York Times at all. Not even at all. Every headline that I've ever read from them in recent months has been not news. It's opinion masquerading as news. And so, they've got an agenda, as far as I can tell, just like people on the right have an agenda. Everybody wants to make their claim and debunk and around and around we go. It's like a merry-go-round. This stuff should have been sorted out in court. We never got that chance. So now our Congress people are going to sort this stuff out in Congress. And they're going to be called seditious and traitors and executing a bloodless coup like Jake Tapper said. But there is no other remedy. So what else are they supposed to do? We've got True Skeptic who says Pence toss of all competing electoral college votes from all battleground states. Neither gets 270 and it goes to a congressional vote by delegation. So, that would be an interesting thing. That would be an interesting thing to happen tomorrow. I don't see it happening. Pence could do it. I think Pence wants to run for president in 2024. So it's a hard, is he going to sacrifice his future presidential ambitions to save Donald Trump's second term? Maybe I'm just too cynical about this stuff, but I think that's a hard no, right? These are politicians. I know a lot of people have a lot of faith in Mike Pence. I think he's an excellent vice president. I mean, his performance in that debate was excellent. He's just been rock solid for these 4 years, sort of totally unflappable, cannot be flapped. So is he going to just sort of throw away that reputation to make a show tomorrow? I really don't think so, but I could be wrong. We have Lava Java Lava, Lava Java. Have you defended a client for violating COVID-19 laws yet? So we actually have not seen anybody charged with a COVID-19 crime yet. Okay, no face mask crimes in Arizona. We have not seen any. Probably the closest thing would be maybe trespassing charges. People being places where they shouldn't be. So those are regular trespassing charges. In Arizona, we've had sort of the closest legal action we've seen. I have friends who run gyms and hair salons and stuff like that, and we had cops showing up at their places of business for about a week. It was weird. I got a number of phone calls all at the same time, text messages and phone calls. Hey man, Scottsdale PD just showed up at my place. What do I do? Other places that I frequent say, hey, PD just swung by, and it was sort of a week. We just saw one after another. The police department was sort of going around, checking on masks, making sure that they're not over capacity and all that type of stuff. But they didn't do anything about it. And in fact, many of them told me, yeah, the cop was asking me questions without a mask on. And I said, of course, yeah, it's not about that. Right? It's about compliance. It's about making sure that you're following the rules, and the city council and, all of the people in government, they want to make it known that we care about COVID, right? Well, we're doing stuff. Look, we're sending cops all over the place. Cops don't care. The city council people don't care, but they gotta, the S rolls downhill. Okay, so Ducey or somebody said something to somebody, there was an order on high in Arizona, start cracking the whip on the COVID stuff because we're getting a bad rap. That's all that happened. Nobody ultimately got arrested or, charged with a crime or anything like that. I have seen a lot of that outside of Arizona, but we just haven't seen much of it. Thanks, Lava. We have another one from Chairman of the Board who says, do you think there's any chance any Dems in the House will go along with Ted Cruz's plan to ask for a 10-day audit? I don't, Chairman. I just don't. The Democrats are lockstep. This has been the case my whole life. My whole life. We've seen it, right? I mean, even, harken back to like the McCain days. McCain's always like in the middle. He's a Republican, but kind of not. Those conversations about him flirting with, being an independent or joining, who was the other, Andrew Lieberman, joining this independent caucus, and he's the maverick. He's a Republican, but not really because he's a maverick, and the Republicans are always squishy. Romney's squishy, Murkowski's squishy, Ben Sass now is squishy. We've also got Susan Collins, who's always kind of, straddling the line. Democrats, that's not the case with them. If they need the votes, they go get the votes. And it doesn't matter how upset they are about it. They get them locked. Tomorrow's going to be a big deal. Are any of them going to cave and flip sides? I don't think so. I just don't. We have Aaron Seavey who says, hey, Bobbert, big fan of the show. Keep it up. So if someone comes into R&R Law for a case evaluation, do they get you or does that cost extra to see you? So that's a good question. So typically they don't meet directly with me. We have sort of a process. We've got a decent sort of mid-sized firm here. And so we've got sort of this vetting process that, the people go through. Quite frankly, I'm not the best person to speak to right away, right? There's a series of things that needs to happen before I would get involved in a case. And so we have a process that we go through. You meet with a couple people, meet your legal assistant. We have other attorneys who work on cases, but I'm involved in sort of select few cases around the office. I'm not traditionally sort of boots on the ground in court so much anymore as I am sort of, managing the firm, making sure that the attorneys have what they need, the legal assistants have what they need. And then a lot of what I do is sort of big picture vision stuff, vision, where's the firm going? What's our message? What's our culture? What do we want to see? How do we want to change and improve the criminal justice system? Which is sort of how Watching the Watchers was born. It's we want to do more. We want to be out, be more vocal and change things. We don't want to just be another law firm that has, my face on a bunch of billboards on bus sides. Like, hey, Robert Gruler here, call our law firm. That's fine. Other lawyers can do that. It's boring as hell to me. I'm not interested in that. How can we fix the justice system, create some momentum? As I say at the beginning of the show, shine that spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon the system. That's the only way we're going to see any meaningful change one way or the other. And so my role at the firm is now, it's vision, and it's a lot of management and making sure that, sort of like a coach of a football team, making sure that the players are ready to go. We've got a strategy, we've got a vision, we've got the plays to execute in line. And that's it, right? And so, it kind of depends. I'm certainly available if somebody wants to see me. I go in and say hello, but it's not a situation where I'm on sort of, every single phone call or consultation, because the firm's just too big. I just don't have enough time. And plus, I got to do this show, right? I got to be here with you, Aaron. So thanks for the good question. We have another one from Cheryl who says, I heard a couple of contested state legislatures have sent letters to Pence asking him to delay counting. Would those carry any weight to postpone? So I don't think legally. Right? There's sort of two wars going on right now. We've got the court of public opinion and we have the court of law. We have, what do the lawyers and the judges say can happen? And then we also have the court of public opinion. And so Trump and his legal team have been really working hard to win in both fields. They haven't done so good in the court of law, but they've been somewhat persuasive in the court of public opinion. And so a lot of these letters are just being sent over to Mike Pence, I think. So he has a little bit of cover. Right? If he's going to do something tomorrow, he needs political cover in order to do that. And that's what I think they're trying to achieve. All right, let's take a look back in at some of the numbers because it's been about 20 minutes. So if we go back over to the Washington Post, here is what we're looking at. Let's get that chat box back up. So we are now down to 52% of the votes have been cast, and it looks like Ossoff is still up by about 100,000 votes, 52 to 47. Perdue is down by 99,000 votes. Warnock is also up 1.19 million to 1.073. So he's up by 116,000 votes. 2 million ballots left to be counted. 52% of the votes are in. Let's take a look at the map. Looks like stuff around Atlanta is still coming in. DeKalb County is now at 29%, which seems low. Cobb County also 31%, which is low. Fulton is 82%, which is right next door. So we're kind of, what's going on in some of these other counties? Why are they so far behind? 82% in Douglas. We got Gwinnett also surrounding Atlanta at 30% in. The rest of the state is looking like it's filling out. Some blue votes around Columbus. Still missing 1% in the Savannah area. So I don't know what they're doing, but those votes are not coming in, and still a lot of white, right? So a lot of these precincts are still 8%, 2%, 1%. We've got 0%, no results reported, 13% in this one. No results. So, I don't know what that means. We'll take a look at Twitter and see if anybody's seeing any more irregularities. So we've got... Let's see what is going on over here. We've got Viva Frey, our friend over there, says our governments are killing us in a way no virus ever could, which is exactly right. Cernovich says brace for impact. It's coming. Sad news to hear about Kanye and Kim. Are they getting a divorce? We got, it's Mitch's fault. Okay, so not a lot of election stuff here in my feed. You can see some of the stuff that I see on a regular basis. But all right, let's go back into the super chats. So we've got Cheryl Myers. We just answered that question about the votes. We have another one from Sach who says, are there any reps or senators who are objecting to the votes in their own state? It's a good question. I don't think so, right? Because in Arizona, we have, so that's not true. So yes, in the House, yes, that's absolutely true. So in Arizona, for example, I think we have Paul Gosar, who's a House representative, and Andy Biggs, who's a House representative. Both of them have indicated that they're going to be objecting. Now, are they going to object to Arizona's votes in particular? I don't know. We'll see. But Ted Cruz objecting to Pennsylvania, right? It's not his state. Why is he objecting to those? Well, it's because we've talked about this when he was suing them, that when Texas was suing Pennsylvania. The idea here is that if you just have a free-for-all in your state and you can just manufacture votes and just print 100,000 ballots and shove them in your voting system, well, that dilutes the voters of the Texans. That dilutes everybody's votes because those votes don't count. If my vote counts for 1.0 and somebody's votes count for 2.0, they get an extra point. Their vote counts for 100% more than mine. And so it was this idea sort of equality of votes, equal counting across the board. So, in Arizona, though, we have 2 Democratic senators. So they're certainly not going to be contesting Arizona's votes. And I think that same story is probably going on around the country. Are Pennsylvania's senators going to object in Pennsylvania? Probably not. I don't know, but I think they're probably both Democrats. So why would they do that? But there are certainly House members, I think, who are going to object from within their own state. Another one from Turd Ferguson says, Pence may not be able to count the ones he wants, but I believe he can decide which are countable, i.e. not in question or dispute. Missing a few SCs. Yeah. So I think Turd, I think you're right. I think there's an argument for that. And so we read, if you're interested in dialing into some of this stuff, you can read Rep. Louis Gohmart's lawsuit. I think we covered it at length on this program. I don't remember a lot of it other than it was just this idea that, the executive is being brought in. It's a constitutional mandate that you see in the 12th Amendment and the Electoral Count Act. And if Pence can't do something to that effect, you need some sort of a gatekeeper to deal with these competing slates of electors. And there are some guidelines and some provisions. We've ran through them a lot here. So I think you can make an argument for it. Truthfully, I think that this is a hole in the law. I don't think it's very clearly defined, which is why Louis Gohmert was suing suing Pence in order to clarify some of this stuff. Okay, that's what happens. It doesn't mean that he was really opposed or adverse to Mike Pence, but he just wanted to clarify. He says, look, I know Mike Pence has his power. Mike Pence doesn't know that he has his power. I think he does, and I want to clarify this. So there is a good argument for it. I think that the result of empowering that person with that authority can be problematic. And so I don't know, problematic in a way that I don't think we can find a reasonable remedy from our interpretation of the law as it exists right now. There is no sort of limitation on what that power is that I've read. And I haven't seen any case law or anything else to that effect. So if we're just going off of that, I think the safer interpretation is that Mike Pence is closer to ceremonial, but that the rest of the process is not, that you can object to it. There can be reasonable conversations about that because that is clearly defined in the law. Louis Gohmert thinks otherwise, and the courts have thrown that lawsuit out. I don't think that it's without argument. I think the law is poorly crafted, and they probably didn't really envision or define that this would be a potential problem, which is why the law is unclear about it. We have another one from Frank Carr, who says the DNC rigged 2 primaries against Bernie. Why wouldn't they rig one general election against Trump, the runoffs elections in Georgia? Yeah, and that's exactly right? If they keep getting away with this stuff, why wouldn't they do it? Right? Why wouldn't they just continue to execute the same plan? Because remember what we've been talking about here. It's not what we've seen in terms of the election litigation and a lot of the evidence submitted to the courts. We haven't really seen sort of a big bucket of votes that we can just say, oh, those are clearly fraudulent. Those were printed in that guy's warehouse and delivered by his friend over here, and this is clearly fraudulent. We're going to throw those buckets out. It really hasn't been that. It's been more of, well, we're just going to change the rules a little bit. We're going to let more people, mail their stuff in without signatures. We're not going to verify these things, just like we went through in the lawsuit from Miss Abrams Gardner, the judge in the federal district court. There's 4,000 voters that are in question, but we're just going to let them vote anyways, because that's what we think is best for democracy or whatever her justifications are. But it's sort of that in that vein. And so those 4,000 people get to vote, even though they, an election board said that, no, they don't even live here anymore. So it's more of those types of arguments. And, if the courts are rubber stamping that, like let's say all of those people voted, well, then all the Democrats are going to say, no, the judge, look, we already had an argument here. The judge affirmed that. The rule is what the rule is. Those 4,000 votes count. Sorry that they went 98% for Biden, but that's just that's the breaks. So it's sort of, like an institutional manipulation of some of the rules at the last minute. It's been the same arguments that I've been making for a long time. This is the same, a lot of this is litigation that has been put in motion by Mark Elias and a lot of the major Democratic legal powerhouses around the country. And if they're just modifying the rules and then operating under the new set of rules that favor them, is that really fraud, or is that just good lawyering and excellent electioneering? So how can they get in trouble for that? They won't. They haven't. So they'll continue to play that same playbook. We have chairman of the board who says subs are over 99,000. Keep sharing and subscribing. P.S. So proud that there's a Turd Ferguson and chairman of the board tonight. Yeah, some extremely good names. Chairman of the board, B-O-R-E-D. Right. Chairman of the board. Thanks, chairman. And thanks. I mean, we're super close to that 100K, which is just exciting. It's all get out. And we're getting real close there. It's funny, YouTube, I can tell when they put us in a bubble because I can see what the numbers look like. And yesterday's show was certainly, I think, in the bubble, even in spite of everything that's going on. So we really appreciate, love every single share, every single thumbs up, an invitation to come join the channel. We're real close. I'm hopeful we cross that number by the end of the week. And it's just a fun number. I like to set milestones. I like to set, kind of big, ambitious goals and then meet them. It's kind of a fun thing. So I appreciate your help in getting us there. And thank you, chairman of the board and Mr. Turd Ferguson. We have Christy Anthony who says, I think South Dakota would say, see you later too. If Georgia doesn't go well, wouldn't they? They are pretty conservative, I think is what she meant. So yes, Christy. Yeah, South Dakota, I heard they're rocking and rolling up there. I think they're like the only state with no lockdowns. COVID cases are under control. Economy's open and booming. Kind of a good formula. Maybe we should think about that in other parts of the country. We have Elinchus Speak says, how can the GOP use evidence tomorrow that has not been given to the Dems before the vote? Imagine if Brady material was kept from you until trial. It's a great point. Yeah, I mean, this is a good point, right? It's called discovery. If you're going to be presenting evidence in a court of law, you have to disclose it to the other side. Okay, if a prosecutor, let's put ourselves on sort of the receiving end of this. If I'm representing somebody who's been charged with a crime and we go into court and we're set for the day of trial, we're ready to make our arguments, and the prosecutor just brings in 5 new witnesses that I've never heard of that weren't in the police report and they have never been disclosed to me, that's a huge problem. I'm going to object hard. I'm going to be doing cartwheel objections in the courtroom, and the judge will say, I agree with you, and all of those witnesses will be precluded. They will be excluded, not allowed in court. The prosecutor can't use them because they didn't disclose them to me because I'm not prepared. I don't know what they're going to say. I have not had a chance to interview them. I can't really, with education, cross-examine them coherently because I don't even know what they're going to say. I'm not prepared to deal with that. And so, Alinchus, what your question I think is, how can the Republicans do that? How can Donald Trump and his team go in and make these presentations? Well, it's because, in my opinion, this is not a court of law, right? This is a political body. That's just what happens in political bodies. There's a lot of leeway about what can happen there and, all the internal rules about what can be presented and not. So in my court, in my state court, we have federal rules of evidence. We have Arizona rules of criminal procedure. We have a structured set of guidelines that we have to follow. So when a prosecutor brings in all of those additional witnesses that they didn't tell us about, I can say, hey, judge, look, here are the rules. They didn't disclose it at this point in time. Therefore, they can't be counted. And so I would just, move under my written authority about what I can do about those people. So in Congress, they've got their own rules, their rules of order on how they govern this stuff. And so we read yesterday the final set of rules that were sort of in place from Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi about how they're going to count these, starting with the letter A, the different A states, and working their way through. And we didn't see anything about that. So, the rules I think are a lot more lax because it's a political hearing. It's not a judicial hearing. So the rules are just a little bit different. But I understand your point, right? How can the Democrats be prepared to respond to this stuff if they don't even know what they're going to say? Well, the chairman of the board says, what to believe? Jovan says he has hacked into the Dominion machine in real time. Georgia's Secretary of State said it wasn't true. No evidence from either. Yeah. I mean, he said it. Has he not presented evidence about that? I would like to see it. But if he's not presenting evidence and the Secretary of State's not presenting evidence, you're right. Who do we believe? We have another one from George who says, Democrats know there is fraud. They just don't care. don't see a good outcome tomorrow. That comes from George. Yeah, tomorrow's going to be, it's going to be a rough one, I think. I think a lot of people are very optimistic. I don't particularly share that optimism. I think that, look, I am not a fan of Joe Biden. I've said that for a long time on this channel. Okay, I'm a criminal defense attorney. Between him and Kamala Harris, I think that those two people are responsible for some of the worst problems in our criminal justice system in some time, and I'm not a fan of either one of them. That being said, I think that the Republicans are sort of running short on some of their options tomorrow. Now, we got a big update here. Major number changes. So we go back to the Washington Post. All polls are now closed. 60% of the votes have been counted here, and we're seeing a little bit of a red wave coming in. So Perdue is closing the gap. He's now down by just 19,000 votes. Remember, we just checked. He was like close to 100,000 deficit. It's now 50.4% for Ossoff and 49.6% for Perdue. So just a very small margin there, 16,000. And same story with Warnock and Loeffler. Warnock is down by Warnock is up by 35,000 votes, and Loeffler is trailing 50.7%. 50.6%, it just updated, and 49.4%. So those margins are closing pretty dramatically right before our very eyes. 60% of the votes cast have been counted here. Let's take a look at the state. All right, so now we can see a lot more red coming in around the state of Georgia. Still a couple of precincts or counties that have not reported anything. Appling County, nothing. Coffee County, nothing. Dougherty, nothing. And some other places. But Atlanta, those areas are coming in. 31% in Cobb County is in. And Ossoff is leading like 2-1 on those votes. Fulton County, wow, 75% to 25%. So all of the, wow, look at this. So DeKalb County, Ossoff is 85% to 14% for Perdue. So the Democrats, 85 to 15, and 29% of those votes are in. So we've got another, huge 70% of those votes coming in. If those are splitting 85 to 15, those are going to, it's going to be tight. It's going to be a tight race. It's going to be down to the wire, I think, on this one. So 61% in. So we'll just keep on chatting for a little bit longer. We'll go back to some of the super chats, and then we'll check back in here in a little bit, and we'll see how long we want to keep on going. So another super chat came in. At this point, is there any amount of evidence that can change this? And so, yes, Jeremy, I definitely do think so. And so, when people ask, is there anything left to be done? I think, yeah, there could be, right? Tomorrow, if Donald Trump brings in, let's say, for example, hypothetically speaking, right? Donald Trump in 2018 issued an executive order that said 45 days after an election, I want the defense secretary, the secretary of treasury, secretary of defense, I want the attorney general. They all have to issue an election security report. They want to do an audit about foreign interference in our elections. It has to take place right after the election happens, and then it's due within 45 days. That was, I think, scheduled to be due somewhere mid-December. Do the math on that. Yeah, like December 18th, I think, was the deadline that it was due. That report got delayed till early January. So what if, hypothetically, they walked into Congress tomorrow with this report, and the report was horrendously damning? China was responsible for buying Dominion and, switching the software, and all of these algorithms, stole votes from Trump and gave them to Biden, and all, if there was a massive, compelling amount of evidence that's presented to Congress tomorrow, yeah, that would I think would be enough to shake people out of their stupor. Democrats would go, all right, listen, that was so compelling, that was so damning, I have no choice but to support, a delay, to support an inquiry into the underlying election, right? It'd have to be something that dramatic, because if it's just the same stories that we've heard, a lot of questions. Oh, we're just asking questions, and isn't it possible? And this could have happened, like Jovan, right? Jovan's testimony was extremely compelling. But it wasn't a proof of fraud. It just said that fraud could happen, and here's how I could find it, and here's why it's so easy to find, and he gave a very compelling explanation of what that looks like. But he didn't turn around and say, therefore, 400,000 Georgian votes are bad, because he hasn't done that analysis yet. But if somebody did do that analysis or a similar analysis, that's pretty compelling stuff. So we'll see if any of that comes out tomorrow. I don't expect it to. Trump said that they're going to be presenting evidence, and there's a lot to come. Even in the transcript that Trump had with Raffensperger, he was saying specifically in there's a couple bullet points where he says, listen, I'm not trying to take the whole world down. Okay, I don't want to find 400,000 votes. I think he said multiple times that he thought he won by 400,000 votes, but he says we don't even need to do that. In other words, I'm not going to reveal all of the information that I have because it's so damning the entire world is going to come crashing down. I don't need that. I'm not going to do it. I just want 11,000 votes. If that is a reality, if there is more information out there that he has that he just hasn't disclosed yet, maybe they disclose it tomorrow. I'm not optimistic about that, right? I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that's going to be sort of a lot of the same claims that we have been discussing here, some good, some not so good. So the bigger claims that I think have weight or merit, of course, I'm a lawyer, so I'm looking at the legal stuff. I'm looking at the rule changes. How did the Pennsylvania Supreme Court go in and change the election rules right before the election in direct opposition, contravention to what the state legislature in Pennsylvania has said are the rules? They passed the rules. The Supreme Court just changed them. Is that allowed? How can they do that? Well, we were looking to the courts for some answers. We didn't get any, unfortunately. So, I think those same arguments are going to be brought up tomorrow. I don't think that those are going to be consequential enough to bring Democrats onto the Trump side. But could be wrong on that. We have another one from George Sankanis, who says, don't see a majority of Republicans agreeing to throw out any votes, and you need 3 states. Yeah, and so that's the other part of it, right? There's a lot of Republicans who have indicated the Republicans are a little bit different because we don't know what bucket they're in. There's been some Republicans who've said, I'm not going to object to any votes. Okay, well, if you want to get real technical here, if you want to get into the weeds on this stuff, what does that mean? So you're not going to object when they're counted. So when Mike Pence is reading those votes, you're not going to object to that. Got it. But what if Ted Cruz does? What if Kelly Loeffler does? And so now we take that joint session, we take those Pennsylvania votes. Ted Cruz objected to those. You didn't, Ben Sass. We take those back into the Senate. They have their own floor debate about it. Are you still going to object or refuse to object there? Because now you will have been presented evidence. Now the door is already open. You're going to have to go back into the Senate and decide. You're going to have to vote. Okay, you have to have a say. So are you now going to listen to that evidence? What if it's pretty bad evidence and you're just going to say, well, no, I'm going to stand by my original vote? Or are you going to flip? They've all answered the first question, but not the second question. Logically, I think you could, like you say here, George, you can make that extrapolation. You can say, look, if they're not going to object to the first question, they're probably not going to object to the second question. But they haven't seen any evidence after the second question, and they haven't specifically precluded that possibility in any of their public statements. Still, is the likelihood that they're going to object, are we going to see that? Probably not, right? They're carving out their positions in a Trump in a future party without Trump. We have Holly and the Cruzes who want to win the primaries. We've got the Ben Sasses and the Cottons who want to win the generals. They're all setting themselves up for 2024, and they're doing what they think serves them best politically. Another one comes in from Frank Carr, says Trump should have marshals seize all classified documents and release them to the press. Say it is needed to investigate election integrity. They need to follow the Mencius mold bug plan. Is that a thing? The Mencius mold bug plan? I've not heard of that. It sounds like something, Dr. Evil would put together. The Mencius mold bug plan. I'll be curious to see what that is. Trump has been saying that he's going to declassify a bunch of stuff, everything. He's been saying that a lot, but I hope that he does. I really want to know what's going on in Area 51. Frank Carr, yeah, there's a lot of people saying that Trump should sort of, seize things and dictate martial law and all of that. I get a little bit skittish on those topics of conversation. I like order. I like due process. I like the rule of law. I don't want Trump going in and sort of just, doing whatever the hell he wants, just like I don't want Biden doing that either, or Kamala, or any of these people, right? They got to follow the rules. Sometimes it's hard. They're going to get stonewalled. They're going to get totally just blown out of the water like the Republicans have across the country. But at least there's some semblance of law and order there. We have Dolt McPhee says, can Pence ask the state legislators which votes they would like to count? Essentially, he would be given the power to the legislators. And so He could, right? I mean, Pence can kind of do whatever he wants, but the argument is going to be that the state legislators already did that. The legislatures already did that. They basically delegated a lot of this authority to the executive branch via the secretaries of state, the secretary of elections, whatever they're called in the various states, and the governors then, pursuant to the state statutes, certify the elections. The legislatures are also in agreement with that. So you have all three branches of government. So when you're talking about casting these certificates of ascertainment in the Electoral College, they are communicating the legislature with the executive. The governor certifies what the legislature put into law, and then they have to send copies over to the federal district court and so on. So you're getting all three branches sort of in the mix. Then once it's finally certified and it arrives on the floor of Congress, those are the votes that went through that process that are to be certified. And so if let's say that Mike Pence was doing what you're saying, and he asked the state legislators, what do you guys want to do? And he asked the entire body of the state legislatures, then I think that they would just default to what the state has already certified. What you're seeing here is sort of, GOP contingents in these different legislatures that are sort of stepping out. They're saying, okay, the state certified it. We don't agree with that. So if Pence asked those legislators, then he could just go on their basis, but they're sort of acting outside of the umbrella of the certification that the state has already put in motion. All right, we have another one from True Skeptic. Says, Lewis County, People's Republic of Washington, DOH Gestapo, finds and takes family-owned restaurant to court for allowing indoor dining, which is just, it's just beyond heartbreaking, right? Family-owned business, people who are just trying to make a living and operate in the world are being taken to court for fines just for trying to run their business. It's disgusting behavior. We have Bianca Perez. Can Pence count votes on states with dual electors and divide the votes? If a state has 10 electoral votes, can Pence give 5 to each candidate? So it's a good question. The answer, in my opinion, is no, right? If you look at the rule, we just read Section 15. It talks about objections. It talks about, the formal process there. There's a lot of room for ambiguity. So it depends on how you interpret the statutes. If you say that the statute is intentionally vague because the idea here is that we're giving Pence or whoever's in this position discretion, that's one interpretation of the statute. The other interpretation of the statute is it doesn't say that specifically. It doesn't say that, if there are dueling electors, that the vice president and the president of the Senate has the option to split the votes. Right? That's sort of not expressly in the statute. Therefore, he doesn't have that power. A converse reading would say, well, it doesn't say he can't do it, so we're going to give him the authority to do that. Well, in my reading of it, you would want to take both of those possibilities to their logical extensions. If we say that Mike Pence, the vice president, the president of the Senate, does have all that discretion, it's a lot of discretion. And we can take that and just sort of extrapolate that to the point of absurdity, that they can just, the next time Vice President Kamala Harris could just say, yeah, Republican votes gone, Republican votes gone, Republican votes gone. Joe Biden just won re-election by a landslide. All 50 states, outstanding, well done, right? You could, if you put a precedent in place that allows that, then somebody else is going to run with that. So that version of interpreting how this can go, I think, is more absurd than saying Mike Pence just can't do that, right? He gets to open them. He can maybe make an argument, make a record about it. But ultimately, the decisions on what to do with those votes is left pretty clearly in the statutes up to the two parties of Congress, the two houses individually. Thanks, Bianca. Good question. We have Jimmy Hernandez says, if Pulitzer hacked into the current election and data is sent to China, shouldn't that be enough to get the GBI, FBI, DOJ, or some authority involved? You would think so, right? You would certainly think so. You would think that about a lot of these claims. But we just haven't seen it. Is it because, and here's the other problem, they haven't communicated that much, right? We saw from the Department of Justice, we saw Bill Barr say that we looked into this, haven't found any evidence of substantial fraud. But then he bailed out. He's not at the DOJ anymore. So, was there any effort to look for this stuff? The FBI had the Hunter Biden laptop apparently since 2019. They didn't communicate that to anybody. Why not? Well, is it because it would have been damaging to Joe Biden, or is it because there's nothing there? I mean, we went through some of it. I think there's enough there that maybe we should know more about it, but they haven't been communicating to us. Maybe they've looked into this stuff and they found that nothing exists. But as is standard policy, the FBI doesn't comment on a lot of these investigations. They just say, yeah, we're looking into it. We'll let you know. That's it. So maybe they are involved. Maybe they're not. Maybe they did get involved and they just said, no, there's nothing there. Who knows? All right, another one. We got a couple more. We've got Chill Bill says, Senator Grassley suggested earlier today that he would oversee the roll call tomorrow. If Pence excuses himself, he wouldn't have the professional conflict for Prez. Interesting. Okay, so, I thought I saw a headline somewhere that said that he was going to officiate the hearing. Mike Pence has decided that he was going to be there. I don't know if that has changed yet. Let's take a look back at the Georgia election because we have a change in the leaderboard. We've got Perdue is now up 50.2% to 49.8%. So there are 66% of the votes have been counted here, 11,000 vote differential, and David Perdue is now winning. So the Republican is on top. Democrat Jon Ossoff is now losing by 11,000 votes. So that one flipped. In a big flip. Remember, this happened pretty quickly, and it just increased, actually. So it's now up, Purdue's up by 14,000. We also have Warnock, who is just barely hanging on by 12,000 votes over Senator Kelly Loeffler. 1.4 million ballots left to be counted. And Warnock is up 50.2% to 49.8%, and that margin is shrinking again. Just changed. 12,000 now that is shrinking to. We take a look at the map. Looks like most of Georgia is filling in pretty red. Still a couple of counties that are just not reporting at all. Coffee County, no results. Stewart County over near Columbus, no results. Taylor near Columbus, nothing. Atlanta mostly filling in blue. Okay, so Fulton now has 87% recorded. Cobb County is up to 38%. Still a big gap there. 35 into Cobb. And that margin's closing a little bit. It was 85 to 15. Now it's 83 to 16. And then in Gwinnett, 33%. So, still a lot of runway left, but the margins are certainly flipping. So Warnock is now up by 12,000 and Perdue is up by 14,000. And so we'll check back in with those results, but looking good. If you are a Republican Perdue fan, he's really closed that gap, and we'll see if that trend continues on. We have Helen Alera, who says the time for auditing the 2020 election has passed. What will be our remaining option? Just accept the obvious corruption of the U.S. government. So, it's pretty obvious to me. It's something that I think is just a function of government in general. A lot of Americans, at least, I used to think this when I was a boy. Gosh, all these other countries around the world, they're just really corrupt. God, think about that. How can they, how do they even live with themselves, letting such a corrupt government control their lives? And then when I grew up a little bit, I look around at our government, I'm going, wait a minute. I think they're worse, because at least they're, at least in Mexico or something, like, you kind of know how it works. You know who's running things and how things work. Right? You ever been down to Mexico on spring break? Right? You get in trouble from the police officers, the federales. You know how that system of justice works. You slip them a 20, they go away. Okay, it's pretty clear. Like, the corruption there is like right on its face. Here, though, it's, we have this facade that our government is just, they're looking out for us. They care about us. Warnock, Ossoff, and Perdue and Loeffler, like, they care about the little people. They care about us. Well, do they, though? Because they just passed a $2.4 trillion spending bill, which my generation is going to have to pay for, and my kids' generations. And they did it in 2.5 hours. It was 5,500 pages of spending that nobody in Congress read, and they just crammed it through. So how is that not corruption? Where is that money going? Has anybody done any investigation onto where that's going? Well, no, they can't, because it's all just part of the deal, right? It's just how Congress works. Are you telling me that all that money is clean and good and there are no issues with that? Nobody's getting a little bit more than they should. Nobody's funneling off one of those, $50 million checks, which is just like tip money in the context of a $2.4 trillion spending bill. It's like tip money. $5 million to your brother-in-law who's going to run something, or, are you telling me that there's no corruption there? It's happening every day. It's right on the face of it. That's why I'm sort of an equal opportunity critic of both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats. I think they're both responsible for it. So, Yeah, I mean, we just have to kind of live with that, I guess. Live with some of the obvious corruption. And I would say brace yourself for it. If the Democrats take the Senate and they pack the courts, which is a possibility, which I think that they would probably try to do that. I mean, I think it would be an insane political move, but if they win, why wouldn't they try to do that? If you're a Democrat and you're a staunch liberal, you should do that because they control both houses. See if they do. Hang in there, Helen. Your super chat sounds a little bit depressed. I get it, but our options here are to live well, do well, live a happy life, not get too invested in this government stuff because we'll all be okay, even though they're fleecing us at every corner. We have Maureen and Ron Catalano who says, will Congress be the SCOTUS hearing we are all waiting for? It could be. Yeah. I mean, this is kind of how Trump and his team are framing this. Thanks, Maureen and Ron. They are saying, Trump said in that transcript, or it wasn't the transcript, but it was I think it was a tweet actually that we played yesterday or showed on the screen where he said, yeah, there's going to be a lot of evidence presented tomorrow. Don't know what that looks like. Don't know if it's going to be new evidence that we haven't seen before. I'm not real sure, what they're going to present that we haven't already covered, but if they have some sort of insider information, or there are a lot of people saying that, they've been planning for this, like they've been gathering this evidence for a long time. They set everybody up, and tomorrow is going to be the big day where we have that big reveal. We'll see. I'm going to have my popcorn ready, though. I'm excited about it. Right? We're going to be ready to rock and roll tomorrow. Aaron CV says, Dems courts, they keep hustles like impeachment, election rule changes, and won't quit. We need to write the election within rule, then fix/patch this BS after the fact. Yeah, I saw another post, Aaron, from, I think it was Brad Raffensperger, who was on Twitter saying that, we do need to, sort of modify some things. I think he was talking about paper ballots or something like that. And so, yeah, you're going to see a lot of after the fact fixes, a lot of, mea culpa. Oh, yeah, we can improve. Listen, this election was totally perfect. No fraud. Everything was by the book. We're not going to give you access to anything. You can't see anything, but just trust us. It was all good. Then after the fact, but listen, we know that there are room for improvement. We know that we can sort of improve this stuff. And so we're going to make some slight modifications moving forward. I'm not real optimistic that there are going to be, any real national changes to how elections are run because there have been no repercussions for it. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Maybe there'll be enough people out there who want some more, let's say, election reforms or some guidance. I was just asking for some guidance. I would just like the Supreme Court to say, can individual courts, can individual board of electors run elections differently than how the people in the legislature voted for them to be run? Can they do that? The Supreme Court, in my mind, has said, sure, yeah, do whatever the hell you want. You can run elections however you want. And another state can't even complain about it. That's a problem. And I think with that precedent in mind, we're going to see more of this stuff in the foreseeable future. So we may not see any changes, say, before 2024, but if this stuff happens again, this is just going to continue to escalate, which is, right, that's sort of necessary in how we structure our government. The problem has to become severe enough that enough people demand to fix it. I don't think we're there yet. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Maybe it'll change dramatically tomorrow. But maybe not. We have Sach again, who says, this is exactly what I was confused about on November 3rd election night. They say polls are closed. So are the other 40% of votes remaining mail-in ballots? Yeah, it's a good question. Let's take a look. So they give us a little bit of guidance on some of that. Let's see if we can piece it together. So from the Washington Post. All right. So we can see some of this. Urban counties are right there around Atlanta. So they're breaking down the estimates, possible vote range. Let's see if we can see what is outstanding. So not much here. Live estimates are calculated on past results. So are they giving us any information? These little bar charts look pretty blank. Just hit a refresh. No changes on any of that stuff. So we'll just check on the total numbers. Oh, wow. It looks like Loeffler is also in the lead now by 5,000 votes. So this is pretty interesting. So Perdue is up 50.5 to 49.5 by 1 percentage point, which is 31,000 votes. 67% have been cast at this point. So we've got just less than a third left. Perdue is up. Very small margin. My goodness, right? Really small. But he's over the 50% mark. We've got Loeffler who is also in the lead by a very narrow 8,900 votes over Warnock. 1.4 million ballots left to be counted. She's up by, oh my goodness, 4/10 of a percentage point. So let's see what the New York Times has to say about some of this stuff. Live updates. Votes are being tallied with Senate control at stake. 4 minutes ago, Nate Cohn says the race now leans toward the Democrats. There's a long way to go and it's close, but they have done better and they need across all vote methods and in all regions. Here's what we know when the mail-in ballots will be counted. All eyes on the mail-in ballots when they were tallied. Mail-in ballots could not be counted before the polls closed, even if they arrived before Election Day. Many ballots have already been processed, meaning envelope signatures and addresses have been verified, though the tallying of the votes themselves only began Tuesday night. Of course, it's hard to say how long it will take for all of them to be counted. Some mail-in ballots may not have been received yet, although most Georgians had to get their mail-in ballots by the time the polls closed. 7 p.m. Eastern, military and overseas voters have 3 additional days for their ballots to be received as long as they mailed them by Tuesday. All right, so as long as they're postmarked by what is today? Today, Tuesday? Yeah, today's Tuesday. So it would only be as long as they mailed them by Tuesday. So if they're in the mail, they get there in the next few days. Yeah, now military voters, you can suspect that those are going to go for Trump, whereas the overseas voters, those traditionally go for, I'm sorry, who the hell am I talking about? The military votes are going to go for Republicans traditionally. Overseas voters are going to go for Democrats, okay? Typically, that's just how they split from my general knowledge of it. So 3 additional days. Some counties, they'll count their mail-in ballots faster than others. So when will they all be counted? Nobody knows. Only time will tell, according to the New York Times. And I think that is accurate, right? We didn't have a result on election night. Probably not going to have one tonight because it's just too dang close. There will likely be recounts. There will likely be lawsuits and other audits, depending on how close these are, right? We just hit a refresh. Loeffler's up by 13,000 now. Perdue's up by 37 now. And most of the state of Georgia is looking pretty red. A couple of sort of outlying counties that haven't been counted yet. Most of Atlanta looks like it's still really out there. Fulton County, 85% in. Douglas County, 89% in. But Cobb only has 30%, 38%, almost 40% in. Those are going to be big numbers for the Democrats when those do come in. I mean, especially given the fact that we're only talking about, a couple dozen votes. Same with the Cobb. It's an 83-16 split. There's looks like 65% of those votes are still out there. So when those come in, you're going to expect to see a big surge in the blues for the Democrats. But a lot of these other smaller counties are also, most of these counties are actually almost all in. So we can see here 98, 96, 91. We've got 92, 99 over there, 63. So it looks like a lot of the red counties are in, but big numbers in the blue counties are not in. Let's take a look and see what the tweet world looks like. Georgia Senate runoffs, official results. Let's see. Anything good here? Nope. All this is 2 hours old. Pretty boring stuff. Let's go back over to the regular feed, see what people are posting. Nope, not too much there. So let's hit back on the super chats. We have a couple other questions that we'll get to. We have this one. Did I get this one? Yes. Wait. Okay. So we answered some of that, Sach. I'm not real sure that was satisfactory, but the answer here is nobody knows. We have Real with Robo at R&R Law. Can you explain why martial law over this would be stupid? So yeah, my issue with martial law is that it's giving a lot of total control to one entity. So it's sort of consolidating power into one individual or one group of individuals. And I don't like that idea. I like sort of a distributed government. I like the government to have less power, not more. And so here you have to think about it in the context, right? Many of us are upset about this election, whether you think that there was like legitimate fraud, buckets of fraud where some votes should be thrown out, or you think it was something more institutional or systemic where the media was involved. Twitter, the big tech companies were involved. A lot of these election people were allowing modifications of the rules because the lawyers were involved. If you think it's sort of that, we're all a little bit frustrated about it. But what do we do about it? Well, can you just empower one president or one person to come in and sort of commandeer the process? It may feel good and maybe satisfying right now because many of us feel like there was at least some irregularities and problems that are worth investigating. And so we limit the scope of this commandeering of the election to just, limited scope here. It would never expand beyond that. But that's a precedent, right? That's precedent that is going to be taken advantage of further down the road. And at some point, there's going to be a Democrat in office who wants to use that power and will now have the basis to do it on the back of a Republican president. So Republicans won't have anything to object to. So if we do that, my version of it is that that's a bad precedent. If we have to live with Joe Biden for some period of time in order to avoid having the military come in and take control of the country or take control of certain parts of the country in violation of our civilian government, our civilian order, due process, even though it may be broken in many ways, it's still better than bringing in an external military force to come in and just supplant, to get rid of all of the underlying operations that we cherish, all of our freedoms that are embodied in the Constitution, right? We have due process. Dominion, as much as you may think that they're problematic, they've got due process. It's their machines. The government just can't come take that stuff. If they come and take the Dominion machines, maybe next time AOC wants to come and take your car. She says, it's too big, it pollutes too much, we're just going to take it, right? And it's just dangerous precedent. So I just don't like the idea of bringing the military in. I understand people are frustrated. I understand it feels like there's no recourse, but I think the proper recourse is to fix the system, work within the system. I think it starts locally. And I also think it starts with being vocal, getting out there and speaking about some of this stuff, which is what we're trying to do here. So hope that helps a little bit. We have another one from Rajesh Shakar who says, why does Pence hesitate? Democrats will never like him. Section of Republicans can only hate him. Why not order an inquiry and look reasonable? Yeah. Rajesh Shakar, I think Mike Pence is much more of a mainstream Republican than Donald Trump. I think he's a pretty conservative guy, but he's sort of, I think, in the same wheelhouse as a lot of these other mainstream Republicans. They're all a part of the institutional power in Congress. They're all sort of insiders. Kind of every one of them is an insider. Donald Trump's an outsider. So the power system is going to consolidate to protect the insiders. They're going to circle the wagons and protect themselves. Donald Trump is going to be the martyr who is sacrificed and thrown out. And we're going to see what the American people have to say about that, right? They're all going to be up for re-election at some point. Pence is going to run for office. We'll have Cruz run. We'll have Sass run. We'll see what people say about it. It'll be 4 years from now. I can tell you that it will still be fresh in my memory. Wonder about some of the others around the country. We have another one from Clockwork who says, what do you suppose the chances are of the Democrats coming in and successfully passing litigation that judges denied for Republicans? Well, yeah, Clockwork. I mean, the Democrats are crushing it in court around the country. They did so before the election. Many people are new to the channel, but we covered a lot of the litigation that took place all the way up until the election. We were talking about the lawsuits that were taking place. The Democrats were suing Jocelyn Benson in Michigan. The Democrats were suing Kathy Boockvar in Pennsylvania. The Democrats sued Brad Raffensperger in Georgia. They entered into a settlement agreement. They came to an agreement. The Democrats led the charges in all three of those states. They all flipped. They all went in favor of the Democrats. The Democrats are very successful in this stuff. And it's because the Republicans have no legal team that can hold us a candle to anything that the Democrats are doing. So if they're going to keep moving forward and being very aggressive with their election litigation and the Republicans don't respond, they're going to keep getting blown out in courts. And it's not actually, it's not actual fraud in the sense that somebody was printing fake ballots and running them through a tabulating device. It's fraud in the sense that they change the rules in a way to favor them. But if they change the rules and they're operating according to those rules, is it really fraud? Well, no, then the courts are going to look at it and say, no, that wasn't fraud. That was just good electioneering. That's really what it comes down to. An election is not so much about, the will of the people, but it's about who can carve the rules in the manner that supports their side the best. Democrats are running rings around the circles around the Republicans. We have Derek Roberts who says, losing an organ and back to bodybuilding, I learned this. Do the best you can with the best of what you got. That's the best you can do. Adjustments. So good call on that, Derek Roberts. I appreciate that. That's a nice It's a nice statement. So losing an organ and back to bodybuilding, yeah, I mean, that's a big deal. Hopefully it was an organ that you're okay without. Kidney, you can get rid of that. Appendix, get rid of that. But some of the other ones I think are pretty important. So hats off to you, Derek, for going through that, getting back to work, and having a good attitude about it. Do the best you can with the best of what you got. That's the best you can do. I like that. Right? And I think that's good advice, especially in light of a lot of what's going on around the world today. We have another one from Greg Harris, who says, who presents the evidence to Congress tomorrow? So I think it's going to be the senators and the representatives who object. They're going to be the ones who sort of start the conversations. But then when you read the rules, they all get, I think, 5 minutes to make their pitch. So a number of different people can make their pitches. Now, I don't know what the internal rules look like or how this is going to break. I'm not even real sure if we're going to see some of this stuff. Whether they're going to let the cameras in or not. I haven't verified that. I just don't know. I'm hopeful. I mean, I think we should, but I don't know. And, there's some pretty strict time limitations, and they're probably going to pick the people who they think are most articulate. As another commentator here just pointed out on a super chat, they said specifically that it looks like Ted Cruz will pick one of them, Loeffler will pick another one, and another senator will pick another one. So they're probably formulating their plan on how this is all going to go as we speak, and we'll see it tomorrow. Looking forward to it, though. We hear, oh, hey, Beth Coddington is in the house. Says, hi, Robert. You were one of my 2 favorite live streams. Am I crazy and delusional for still being optimistic that Trump will prevail? You don't know me, so I can ask you that without judgment. Well, Beth, I appreciate that. I'm wondering who that second live stream is, and I'm trying to figure out what I need to do to level that up a little bit, knock that other person out a little bit. But are you crazy and delusional? I don't think so. I mean, I think that there is a path. I would say this, it is a long shot, right? It is something that is very unlikely to happen, but it's still a path. If there was zero path, I would say, well, maybe you're overly optimistic. I don't think I would say that you're delusional or anything like that, but there is enough here that I think a reasonable person could take a look at the election and say, yeah, this was troubling. Right? We should at least look into this. And I just don't think that has happened yet to the extent that many people are feeling satisfied. And what we're going to see tomorrow, in my mind, is following the rules exactly as they are written in Congress. So if we let them, let this all play out, many people like Jake Tapper yesterday are saying sedition, treason, and a coup. And you go, well, that's what the rules say. That's what Section 15 of the U.S. Code has written in the law. How can people following the U.S. law be traitors and treasonous? They can't, in my mind. So if they're going to be just following the rules and trying something, even though it may not be good for them politically, even though they, it may be fruitless, like there's no reasonable likelihood that they're going to ultimately prevail, they're still allowed to do it. And there is an opportunity for Trump to present evidence, or his team to present evidence. And if it is consequential, like they are claiming that it is, there could be a path there. So I don't think it's delusional. I think it's a long shot just to, manage expectations. All right. I don't want anybody to come out of the day tomorrow and say, you said that this was going to go. It's a long shot, guys, because the House of Representatives is controlled by the Democrats. Okay, if it was a Republican House and a Republican Senate, much, much, much higher possibility. But it's not. So we got to live with the numbers. We have Zara PhD who says, I read one thing from years ago that said, if the House and Senate come to differing decisions tomorrow about whether to keep the votes and the VP decides, thoughts. So I read that differently. When we were looking at Section 15, what I read was that they stay. If there's a disagreement, the votes count, as long as they're certified and regularly given. Like it needs to be unanimous. It needs to be sustained objections from both houses. So I think that's the rule. I'm not sure that Pence has any say. Pence probably would have a say if like there was a tie. Okay, so like let's say that the Senate splits 50-50, or because we're not going to have 2 senators, 49-49, and we need a tiebreaker, Pence would come in and split the tie in the Senate. But I don't think that's a possibility in the House because there's 435 members. Unless something like with COVID happens and we have people who are not there, not voting, and COVID's another thing. It's another indication that something could go wrong. There are other variables at play, which is why everybody's so tense about this. Everybody in the media is, treason, 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 treason. They can't say anything else. Well, let's just see what happens. Okay, let's just see. I'm looking forward to that. Thanks, Zara PhD. Looks like she might have a YouTube channel over there, so maybe go check her out. Zara PhD. I like that because I do Robert Gruler ESQ. We work hard for those 3 letters. We work hard for those. We got to put them somewhere. All right, Zara, thanks for that. We have, looks like our last one coming in, and then we'll just check out what the numbers look like. Frank Carr said the DNC abandoned the rule of law. Number 1, the DNC attacks our sovereignty, is treasonous, a la the Great Reset. They literally employ violence against us via Antifa. We control the cops, military, and food. We win. Good analysis on that, Frank Carr. Yeah, you know, one of my criticisms of sort of the liberal school of thought is that they really don't follow the law all that well, right? They like to change things pretty much on the fly. You know, they can go through and they can just sort of modify the election rules at the last minute. Or Amy Coney Barrett had a good explanation of this during her confirmation hearings when she was saying, you know, we like to read the rule, the law, and then apply the law to the facts. Whereas this other sort of philosophy of judicial thought is called active liberty, where they'll look at the law, but they're more interested in not applying the law to the set of facts. They're more interested in crafting what's called an equitable resolution. So the analogy that I've used is your neighbor stole a loaf of bread. Well, they stole the loaf of bread, but you know, if you're an originalist, well, they stole the loaf of bread. That's theft. They should be punished for the theft. If you're an active liberty type of person, you say, yeah, well, technically they stole that loaf of bread, but they needed it and they're hungry. Therefore, I'm not going to punish them. And so in that example, it's sort of weighted in favor of that second scenario. But you know, it's the same type of thing with a lot of what we're seeing around the country. You know, they're moving election rules around. They're sort of manipulating around the margins how this stuff is processed on the ground floor in terms of matching signatures. Can you pick them up from, can you ballot harvest? Can you have drop boxes? Can we move the deadline back on the election from the 3rd to the 6th and so on? So the rules are all being marginally manipulated in a way that serves them best. And yeah, I mean, in my mind, that's not following the rules. That's operating outside of the confines of the rule of law. And we see that pattern repeated quite frequently. All right, let's take a look at the numbers. Let's take a look and see where we are at. So there is Stacey Abrams yet again, but let's go back over and look at the numbers. So margins here are increasing slightly. So there's less than 1 million ballots left to be counted. Oh my goodness, this is going to be a nail biter, folks. So I apologize. Let's bring that back up over here. Let's bring up the chat. Let's get yours truly. All right, so it looks like the margins are increasing a little bit. So Perdue is now up by 53,000 votes, 50.8% to 49.2, 940,000 ballots left to be counted. It's going to be a nail biter. We've got Kelly Loeffler leading by 27,000 with 940 left to be counted. She's up 50.4 to 49.6. Polls closed 3 hours ago. We've been going for 3 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes. 78% of the votes have been cast. So let's take a look at the map. All right, a lot of the stuff around Atlanta is still out. So DeKalb is now up to 37% of those have been counted. That number Fulton is now 85%. That's right next door. Cobb County, 50%. That's 62 to 37% in favor of the Democrats. Those are the big ones. I think those would be probably the most concerning. But those votes aren't that massive. So like Fulton County, we've got 85%, and the total there is about 400,000 in. So 15%. So, you know, if all of those came in, that would be a big change if they all went blue. But around Columbus, sort of in southern Georgia, you know, 99% in many of these, 99% in, 100% of the votes have been counted. So some of these colors that look like they are sort of halfway there, they're actually pretty close. 95% in, 92, 100% in some of these, but still missing a lot around Atlanta. And so those may come in hot for the Democrats. Total numbers, changing a little bit, actually. These numbers are going in the right direction if you're a Republican. So 37,000 for Raphael. Loeffler is up by 36,000 over Raphael. 77 total have been counted. All right, we got one more super chat that came in. I think a couple more have come in, so let's make sure we get to those. We got Zara PhD says, can you make your own short list like SAS? What are the salient points by state? Perhaps putting you on the spot, but like to hear your opinion. So Zara, yeah, it's a good question. It is a little bit on the spot. You know, what I was thinking about doing is consolidating some of this stuff so that maybe around January 20th, we can put out a summary about what happened. We have literally like 1,000 slides, I think. I was doing the math in my head, probably 1,000 slides. We've been talking about this election stuff for like 2 months now. I mean, longer than that. We were talking about it before the election and all of the litigation that was taking place. And it might be reasonable to put together a synopsis, like you said. If I had to just shoot from the hip on this, Pennsylvania, my issue with that was the Supreme Court modified a lot of the election rules on their own last minute. They moved the election back 3 days. There's a lot of other changes that took place there. And the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, didn't give us any clarity. Amy Coney Barrett was not on the bench at that point in time. And it was a 4-4 decision where John Roberts joined the liberals. The lower court ruling stood in Pennsylvania. And I thought that that was a very pertinent question of constitutional law that needed an answer. We needed a decision on that. The Supreme Court dropped the ball. I said before the election, this is going to be a huge problem. We're going to be reliving this stuff in the future. Exactly right. Here we are. Pennsylvania is a huge problem. That was an issue that I thought should have been addressed. And the Democrats sued Kathy Boockvar to modify the rules. The Supreme Court agreed. The Democrats won that. They got the rules they wanted in place. They won the state. Same story out of Wisconsin. Wisconsin, the big issue was this indefinite confinement stuff. And what they were saying is that because the governor passed a COVID order, that you have an indefinite confinement, right? You can't leave your home and all this stuff. So now as a regular voter who wants to vote by absentee ballots, you can just go in and go online. Literally, somebody who's a clerk there shared a link and said, just go to this link, register to vote. When it says upload your ID, you don't really need to do that. Just go ahead and upload it and mark the I'm indefinitely confined. You're good to go, right? And they upload it, they register, they get a ballot in the mail. Nobody verified their ID. All of that, I think that person even got reprimanded for that. And how many people voted in that way or registered to vote in that way? And those rules were changed or implemented by election board people who were just sort of making it up as they went along. They just said, "Oh, COVID, everything's a disaster, so we're just going to change things in the mechanism in the way that we want." And they modified the rules to support their argument. They won the state. Michigan, we didn't spend a ton of time on Michigan. There was Jocelyn Benson there. That case is not. I have to remind myself on what that one was, but it's the same stories. It's COVID. It's modifying the rules at the last minute. Same situation over in Georgia. The underlying issue there was Brad Raffensperger entered into a settlement agreement with the DNC, and I think he brought the Republicans in on that as well. But the Democrats sued the Secretary of State for the same nonsense. COVID. We got to modify all this stuff. Those rules that the legislature passed? Those don't work anymore because of COVID. Did they go back through the legislature and say, hey, amend this stuff and make these changes? We know that under the Constitution, you have total plenary authority, total power to conduct your own elections. Legislature, we have some issues. This is the Democrats speaking. Will you modify those things? No. They just bypassed the legislature. They just went to Brad Raffensperger and they entered into a settlement agreement. The Democrats and the Republicans entered into a settlement agreement with Brad Raffensperger, and it modified the rules that the legislature had already put in place to change those rules once again in a way that favored the Democrats. So it's a lot of these last minute modifications based on COVID, based on these allegations that grandma can't go vote. We want grandma to vote. So we saw those just around the country, and that would be my sort of quick and dirty on it, right? And if they modified the rules to support their claims or support their election strategies, they win the states. Arizona, Nevada, they had some other sort of like incidental issues. In Arizona, off the top of my head, the big issue here was sort of a consolidation of the precincts. So what they were saying is that when we do an audit in Arizona, just like we saw in the Georgia map, we should do an audit, a spot audit on all of the individual precincts. Okay, so just like in Georgia, I just showed you all of those counties. That's how the law says the audit should be done. We look at the precincts, we audit the precincts, there we go. Well, what happened here is they were consolidating a lot of these sort of precincts into these tabulation centers. So they set up, I think, 6 or 8, or maybe it was a much bigger number than that, but fewer of these tabulation centers where anybody from any precinct could go and vote. So now what happens? Well, you have a commingling of precincts. So now when you want to do an audit and you just go to those consolidation buckets. So let me use the bucket analogy. In Arizona, we have 100 buckets, 100 precincts. Well, they were saying, all right, you can vote in your bucket, or you can vote in this massive big bucket that's really going to consolidate, we'll say 30 different other smaller precinct buckets. And then when we do the audit, even though the law says to go from the small buckets, we're just going to pull from the big buckets. Well, the problem there is, the audits are intended to identify irregularities in the election. The purpose there is to identify fraud, right? You want to spot check these smaller buckets. When you commingle everything, if you were to find something problematic, you couldn't then dial it down into the smaller precincts. And so that was what Kelly Ward and the Arizona GOP have been fighting over. And then you have just, constitutional problems all throughout. I read the Nevada lawsuit. I can't remember that one, but I remember I liked it. I thought that there were some good arguments there. We have some of these national change of address form problems where you have Matt Brainard did a great analysis on this for all of the states, where he was talking specifically about the bad buckets of voters. He was saying these people are dead. These people have moved out of state. These people are felons. And he kind of did a very detailed analysis. And he even set up an entire call center. I think he spent $1 million or something like that, buying the data from all of the different secretaries of states, and then hiring a call center to call voters and check, did you vote? Yes, no, why not? Where do you live? And gather that information. And then he put together some pretty pertinent data as well. And so I think those types of irregularities or those types of claims have more weight than some of the other, I would say, more outlandish claims like Hugo Chavez bought Dominion in Venezuela 25 years ago, whatever that story was. Sounds awful, sounds terrible, but we haven't seen much evidence in that regard. We've seen a lot of evidence. I have lawsuits. I've saved lawsuits and litigation. I've got slides of this stuff, hundreds of slides of lawsuits that were filed changing these rules at the last minute. So how can you say that that is not, let's say, a modification of the election, or manipulation or systemic, malfeasance? Maybe it's not malfeasance. Maybe they just switched the rules and they exploited the rules and the Republicans let them do it. So that's a quick and dirty analysis of some of the, I think, most pertinent lawsuits. Hope that was somewhat useful. We have Clockwork, who says, hi, Miss Faith. Even if you're a Democrat who believes the Democrats cheated, you'd be ostracized if you tried to challenge anything. No choice at all. And I agree with that, Clockwork. Yeah, the Democrats they do not fall out of line. Okay, even Nancy Pelosi got reelected. As much as AOC, who are the other ones? Ilhan Omar. There's another, I think 2 others I can't think of right now. They're sort of like anti-Nancy Pelosi. They all voted for her. No problem. I don't know what magical power she has, but it's pretty dang good. She's an effective speaker. Even though I disagree with virtually everything she says and does, she's pretty damn effective. And Clockwork, you're right. They are going to get in line quickly. We have another one from George Katsankanis, who says, what would happen if Biden conceded before January 20th or January 6th? Well, you got President Kamala Harris, which may be forthcoming anyways. Every time I watch Joe, I look at him and I'm just like, my man, like, you don't look good. Am I the only one who's seeing that? He just doesn't look well. And I could just be totally off on that. Maybe he's just old and I haven't seen enough old people. I think I've seen enough old people. I know old versus unwell. I think he's unwell, but maybe it's just me. Maybe it's my cognitive bias. Maybe I'm just off the mark on that. All right, let's check back in on some of the numbers, because it looks like the margins are increasing in favor of the Republicans. Here we go. We've got more results. 900,000 ballots left to be counted. 79% of the votes have been cast and counted. 65,000 now. Perdue is up. So 50.9% to 49.1%. That margin looks like it's increasing a little bit, and Kelly Loeffler is now up 38,000 votes over Warnock. And so we'll take a look at the maps around Atlanta. Still a lot not reporting. 54%. We've got 37%. And so on. So, I think this thing is probably going to come down to the wire. I'm not real sure that this is going to be settled tonight. Even when we get down to 100% of the votes being counted, they're still going to have a lot of the absentee ballots. They're still going to have a lot of the military ballots, overseas ballots. So I do not think that this is going to be resolved anytime soon. Let's see what we have here. Let's go down to the latest in the chats. We had another super chat just come in. All right. One from Pinky2 says, it's only a day before now, but Jovan Hutton Pulitzer has a YouTube and Facebook page. Biden is on his last leg. That comes from Pinky2. So we'll see. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Yeah, so Rainbow Zen Kitty says, yeah, it's just confirmation bias. Zulu's in the house, says, Father God, please put the stock swindlers in the Senate because of moral relativism. So he must be talking about both of the Republicans. We have some other messages. No party has any electors until they are counted coming in. We have John Thompson says, debunk that. Nancy Swindle says, that's the plan. We have Kyung says, yeah, hijacking the word God doesn't mean God will be for your party. We've got a couple other questions. Michael Bravo says, yeah, Biden obviously has Alzheimer's. I don't know. I can't opine on Joe Biden and his ability, but he just doesn't look that well to me. I mean, when he's even just walking away from the podium, he looks unstable. He doesn't look like he can even hardly stand. That's why Jill Biden always walks out and kind of holds him and walks him down the podium or down the stage. But once again, could totally be confirmation bias. I did see during the primaries, or I think during the general election, Joe Biden was on a bike, man, and he was zipping all over the place. So, I could just be totally wrong. It could just be, set and setting, and maybe he's doing cartwheels at home with Jill Biden. I don't know. Another one coming in from George Katsanakis, who says, if Biden concedes, doesn't Trump win, not Harris, if he does it before he gets sworn in? If Biden concedes, doesn't Trump win? No, I mean, so if my understanding here is if Biden, for whatever reason, he's going to make it, all this way. I'm not hoping for that. I'm wishing him well. I'm not, even hinting at that. I just don't think he looks particularly healthy to me. But, if something were to happen to him, God forbid, then I think it is going to be Kamala Harris, right? Because she is the next. You just have to follow the rules. She's next in the line of succession. As it stands currently, a president has not been announced. Okay. We read the rule under Section 15. It says that as soon as the vice president and the president of the Senate reads that into the rules, or, reads it, announces the final tally at the conclusion of the joint session tomorrow, that's when it's effective. Okay. Now it's sort of, looking like that's going to be the case anyways, but it's official. It goes into the journals at the conclusion of the ceremony tomorrow. Once that happens, then Joe Biden has been declared to be the next president. If anything happens after that point in time, he is the president-elect officially at that point. If something happens to Joe, it's President Kamala. It doesn't revert back to Donald Trump. Now, if, let's say, for example, that nothing gets settled tomorrow, we can go all the way up until January 20th. That's the deadline. That's the next deadline that the Constitution gives us. And if Congress can't sort this stuff out between now and the 20th, then the remedy there is Nancy Pelosi becomes the president, right? So they have a strong incentive. Every single Republican in this country has a very strong incentive to make sure that this thing is settled unless they want Nancy Pelosi. All right, and just because something were to happen to Biden doesn't mean that Trump just we go, oh, all right, well then I guess that election doesn't count anymore. It still would revert to Kamala and then later to Nancy Pelosi if nothing is decided by the 20th. All right, so let's take a couple more questions. We think we got another one that came in, and then we're going to wrap it up, folks, because it's been about 3 hours, and I want everybody to enjoy the rest of their night. This one from Student Does Calculus. Hey, Rob, how have you been? Doesn't it feel like Kamala is more excited about winning than Biden? And why does she laugh anytime she's pressed on a controversial topic, like if she's ever smoked marijuana? Mama Joanna is. So Well, I think the reason that she has some issues with the marijuana stuff is because she was a prosecutor in California and she put people in jail and prison for marijuana offenses. So it's probably a little bit of a conflict there. You know, she was a prosecutor, right? And she was prosecuting parents for truancy and all sorts of stuff. Really, really gross behavior as a prosecutor. I remember reading, I think it was one of her motions. This was I think before we even did the show, or I didn't cover it on the show, but something about, you know, they were trying to release a lot of inmates because of COVID and because of overpopulation in California jails. And her office, I don't know if this was her specifically or her office, but one of their arguments was, we can't let them go because we need cheap labor. Like, we use these people to do things around California. And if the court lets them out, then, well, we don't have that source of labor anymore, and California needs that. And they gave a bunch of reasons for that. I'm like, so that's like slave labor? Is that what you're saying? Like, you want cheap labor? That's why you're not going to let these people out? Like, you know, bizarre to me. Between her and Joe Biden, I call him, what do I call him? Top Cop Kamala and Crime Bill Joe, right? Joe Biden was the one who passed the 1994 crime bill, along with 3 other bills in the 1980s and 1990s, that is really responsible for how our entire criminal justice system is structured. I've called him the godfather of our modern criminal justice system because of because of what he did, what he passed. Now, that was a long time ago, and the whole country has changed, and the Republicans were on board and all of that. And you can defend him to the end of the earth about that case, or about that law, but it's still his bill. He was the author of it, right? And if you want to talk about judgment and your record, he's got pretty bad judgment and pretty bad record on that. So I am no fan of either of those people for that reason. I think they have done a lot of harm to our justice system, and I'm not going to let them off the hook for that. Why does she laugh the way she does? I think because she's probably one of the most disingenuous people that I've ever seen in office, right? She's not particularly likable. She got blown out in the primaries. Nobody liked her. She was somebody who sort of fit the mold of what the next candidate should look like. And I think that she checks the right boxes. She's female. She's African-American. She's a senator. She's from California. So she's, quote, progressive. And, she's moderately articulate and, can follow a script. So she checks all the right boxes. She's Joe Biden's running mate. That's what you get out of her. I don't think the Democratic Party was in favor of her before, which is why she lost in the primary so badly. And they just threw her on the ticket. I think that, I think they're sort of grooming her to be the standard bearer of the Democratic Party moving forward. All right, we've got another one from T. Gordon who says, can we meet Miss Faith now that you're almost 100K famous? I'm a newish subscriber, so maybe I missed it a while back. Well, T. Gordon, I don't think we're there yet. We're not at 100K yet. Miss Faith said she'll make an appearance when we cross that threshold. And so we'll hold her to it. We're super close. It's right around the corner. I think I need to set up a different microphone and maybe a different camera. I don't know. I'm not sure what she wants to do. We'll ask Miss Faith what she wants to do. But certainly, she's integral to the program. So we want to make sure that that everybody here gets to meet her. We got another one from Captain Jim. Says, last time you stopped watching The Watchers and turned off Accountability Spotlight on an election night, numbers just flipped. Don't do it again. Yeah, I know. So Captain Jim was here when we were going through the last election, and it didn't work out well for us. All right. We were watching Donald Trump winning across the country, and we I think turned off the show at like 10 p.m. at night, and it was looking pretty good, right? He was winning across the board. And then 3 a.m. hit, 4 a.m. hit. We woke up the next morning, all of the states flipped. Isn't that amazing, right? And we're hopeful that doesn't happen now. Now, Captain Jim, you got me a little bit anxious. I'm about ready to sign off here, and don't want to repeat of that last one. We have Pinky 2 who says, on a radio show, she admitted to smoking pot during the election. So, yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris, I'm not a fan at all. I think what she did to many good people as a prosecutor is just gross behavior, and she sort of laughs it off. So she just admitted that she was smoking pot during the election. Are there any people that she has in prison right now for marijuana violations? Anybody ask her that question, a follow-up question? So it's interesting, Kamala. You smoked literally during this election? Okay. How many people are in custody from your office literally sitting in prison right now because of marijuana violations? Are you open to answering any questions about that? Is anybody asking? I have not heard one. Why not? It's not okay. I think we should expect more from our elected leaders. All right, folks, let's take a quick look at the final numbers before we sign off for the night. And looking like the margins are going in favor of the Republicans. Oh, we got a little bit of a spike there. Look at these spikes. This is interesting. Okay, so this is the votes that have been counted. So we're seeing a lot of these that are, they're counting them in batches. It doesn't look so much like the last time. Remember the last time that we were watching these numbers? It looked more like this, right? A lot more sort of linear. But now they're doing them in batches so that these spikes, we can see these spikes. This is my conspiracy theory. They changed it so that we see more spikes because everybody was pointing out the spikes the last election. So now we just see a lot of spikes. And the numbers look like 82,900 for David Perdue over Jon Ossoff. That margin is increasing, so 51%. And those numbers are a little bit harder to come back from, right? We've also got 54,000. Loeffler is up 50.7 to 49.3. Take a look at the map, see if stuff from around Atlanta is coming in. Yeah, so Fulton is now up to 96%. We've got Cobb, which is 54%, which is more than it was last time. 96 over in Douglas. DeKalb has 37. Still a lot out there, and that one is 82 to 17 in favor of the Democrats. So let's think, if that number holds and we're counting another 63% of those votes at that margin, which is basically, looks like, what is that, 4-1, 82 to 17, whatever that is. If they come in favor of the Democrats, that could really close the gap, especially in the Loeffler case. Some of these other counties that have not been reporting are now reporting. So Coffee County going 73 to 27 for Republicans. Dodge County, same thing, 86 to 13 for Republicans. But these are small counties. They're at 30%, a total of 2,300 votes here. So we multiply that, times another 2. Maybe we'll have another 6,000 votes total out of that county. So these are smaller numbers, but they're coming in. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the margins increasing for the Republicans across the board. But I'm a little bit concerned about some of these, Atlantic counties, because there are still some big gaps there, and those come in heavily for the Democrats. All right, so that was from Pinky. We got another one from Zulu. Let's see what Zulu has to say. Good to see you, Zulu. Zulu always says hello to Faith. I never get a nice hello from Zulu. He says, "Hi, Faith. What's the next silver bullet reveal date after tomorrow comes and goes?" It's a good question, Zulu. So I'm not real sure that we're going to cover it, whatever that next date is. But I don't, let's just sort of flesh this out a little bit. If Joe Biden, if it's a pretty resounding, cut and clear, dry case tomorrow, and Joe Biden is, officially certified, read into the rules by Vice President Pence, is that the end of the argument? Well, yeah, I think it is. I think that's kind of the end of the line at that point in time. Is that going to stop people from making further arguments? No, of course not. I think even Peter Navarro was saying that they wanted to continue to contest this stuff. They were asking for a lot of the counting to take place later. Many people are asking for delays right now. I think out of Pennsylvania, some of the legislators there, they want delays. They want to set a hearing or a commission, sort of like what Ted Cruz was hinting at. We want to investigate this stuff further. We don't have to set it for a decision tomorrow. We can break and we can investigate these things. So the goalposts are always going to continue to move. There's always going to be a fight. I think when Joe Biden's in the White House, laying out by the pool, there's still going to be a lot of people who say, well, but Trump can still win. Sort of like the Bernie can still win people. I think there's still people from 2016 who are still on the Bernie can still win train. It's possible. Maybe he'll beat Hillary. There's a sort of a finite end on this. And I think that tomorrow is the deadline. Now, if it's done and over, it's done and over. If not, if this stuff continues to drag out and we don't have Mike Pence reading that's the final reading that makes it all count according to the rules. So when that happens, as far as I'm concerned, it's done. And we've got a lot of other stuff to get into here on this channel, right? We're going to talk about Rittenhouse just had his arraignment. Matthew Doloff, Ma informed me, has a preliminary hearing, I think, on the 8th, which is this Friday. We just saw that Daniel Prude was not going to be charged, and neither was the cop out in Kenosha. Kenosha police, they issued a declaration, or the city council in Kenosha issued a declaration of emergency. So, they were preparing for the Jacob Blake announcement, and I'm not sure what's going on there because that just happened this afternoon. So we got a lot of other stuff to get into, not to mention we're going to be watching the hell out of the Biden and Kamala Harris administration, watching the hell out of them, and the Republicans too. I'm more disgusted in many ways with the Republicans than I am with a lot of the Democrats. At least the Democrats, at least they're open and sort of honest about it. The Republicans, they like to straddle both sides, talk out of both sides of their mouths. People like Lindsey Graham and even Josh Hawley, right? Josh Hawley was the guy who voted in favor of that omnibus bill and then turn around and now said he's going to object to the electoral vote. So he's kind of, waffling, playing both sides, playing the mainstream side and the populist side in a way that is a little bit tedious. And so we're going to be equal opportunity critics on this program. We're going to watch them all. And I am actually looking forward to, talking about some other stuff. We've been spending basically about 3 months on this election stuff, and it will be good to get back to some other things. Thank you, Zulu. Good to see you, my friend. We have Turd Ferguson, who says, Gohmert versus Pence strategic lawsuit, win-win, since the court didn't define but dismissed for standing. Does this now insulate Pence's actions on the 6th? So yeah, you could argue that it could, right? So if it's sort of that same method of analysis. If the law says that you can do it, you can do it. If the law doesn't say you can't do it, can you do it? If the law just is sort of, off point, it doesn't address that. On the one argument, you can say, well, the law doesn't explicitly grant you the power to do it, therefore you can't do it. The alternative interpretation is, doesn't say you can't do it. And so I understand your point there, Turd, that, it's still open. There's still ambiguity there. There's still room for arguments on both sides. If Pence decided he wanted to do something at last minute tomorrow, he could, and he wouldn't have the opposing side coming back and shoving a court order or a lawsuit in his face and saying, well, see, the judge told you couldn't do it and you did it anyways. So I don't know that it was strategic. I mean, I think that you could make that argument. I mean, I really think that Mike Pence is a pretty straight and narrow guy. I think he's just going to come out, go through the motions, probably read Joe Biden right in there, and he's going to alienate Trump. Trump's going to be pissed about it. And, may see the end of that blossoming friendship. All right, we have another one from John Kreutz. We'll check a couple more of these. We'll take a look at the results, and we'll sign off for the night. We have John Kreutz, who says, great job as always, Rob. Having a back and forth with Miss Faith would be awesome. They want you, Faith. They want you. She's right back there. Can you hear us? All right, so we'll get her on here. We got to cross that 100K here soon enough. We got another one from Trump for 8 years says, what is your opinion on VP Pence contesting the electoral votes and overturning the election? Can this legally happen? Please answer this time. All right, sorry. Sorry about that. So I think you want to, if you want a yes or no, the answer is no. If you want a non-lawyer answer, can Pence do this legally? I do not think that he can. Okay, it's not clear. Truly, it's not. We read through the statute. The law doesn't say what he can do. That's why Louis Gohmert filed the lawsuit. He was trying to resolve that ambiguity. There's, I think, reasonable interpretations of that statute. You can interpret it one way. You can say, yes, he has the authority to do it. Okay, if Mike Pence has the authority to throw out those votes, he's the most powerful person in the country. He gets to pick the next president single-handedly, which is kind of an absurd conclusion, which is why I don't read it that way. I read it in the way that it doesn't say what he can do about it, but the rest of the law, when you read that provision in context, what it's saying is Mike Pence can pick up these votes and hand them to the tellers, and then they count them, and then they hand them back to him, and then he announces it. He reads it into the record. It goes into the journal. That's the end of the session. But the rest of Section 15 does say about objections. So he can open them up. The objections to the not regularly given component that is defined in the statute, that is reserved for the congresspeople, for the senators and the House representatives. It doesn't say that he gets, so my point here is that it's defining the rules for the rest of the people who are playing the game. It doesn't say what Mike Pence can do. But because we know the other people have rules about that stuff, that means they're the ones responsible for making those decisions. If we wanted Mike Pence to be able to do that, we would have told him to do that. We didn't. We would have said that that position had the authority to make that decision. We didn't. We said that the other people in Congress have that authority. And I think that this is just in alignment with just good governance, right? I made this argument many times that the legislature is the sole branch of government that is most closely connected to the people. They're really connected to us. Okay. When we have a governor, for example, it's Arizona, Doug Ducey, the representation ratio there is pretty big. It's 1 Ducey to 7 million Americans. So I have 1/7 millionth% influence on the governor. Okay. When I have a local representative, it's much smaller than that, right? It's 1 to a precinct, 1 to, 50,000. So I have 1/50,000th representation with that local legislative representative. And so it's kind of the same story with our federal Congress. Okay, in Arizona, we've got a number of representatives. I have a bigger sliver of that than I do a sliver of the executive branch on the federal government. I'm 1 to 356 million in the federal government for the executive branch. There's only one Mike Pence, but we got, I think 9 representatives here in Arizona. So it's a bigger sliver. I think that the legislative branch is more closely connected with the people, and they're the ones who ultimately should decide the political questions. We don't want to give that power to one single person, one unified entity that just gets to decide. That type of stuff should be relegated to the smallest sort of political faction that we can, because we want the most amount of representation. So even though I know many people want Mike Pence to just sort of frisbee those ascertainment right out the window, I don't think that that is going to happen. Let's take a look back at the results before we sign off for the evening. Hopefully we don't jinx this thing, but it's looking like we got 86% of the votes now in, and the margins kind of just keep growing. So 94,000 for David Perdue. He's up by almost 100,000 votes. That margin is increasing 51.3% down to 48.7%. Post estimates 86% of all the votes have been counted here. We also have Loeffler is up now by 64,000 votes with 610 ballots left to be counted, 50.9 to 49.1. Let's take a look over at the New York Times and see what their numbers say. Sort of the same story there. Loeffler's up 50.9 to 49.1. Perdue's up 51.3 to 48.7. 3 minutes ago. Let's see the races. We got some updates from some New York Times people. With the races close, it's worth mentioning that if the result is within 0.5 percentage points, the losing candidate can seek a recount. Ballots would be run through the scanners again, which I would fully expect to happen. We got the Chatham County, which includes Warnock's hometown, Savannah, Cobb County, and an increasingly diverse Atlanta suburb, still have large chunks of uncounted votes, which is the same observation that we made, right? When we were over here on the Washington Post, we saw that a lot of these surrounding suburbs here, we've got DeKalb County, 81.4. We've got Clayton County, 85%, 42% over here in DeKalb. So only half those votes have been counted. So there's another, presumably, there's another 150,000 votes out there. And those votes are splitting currently in favor of Democrats, 81 to 20%. So what's 80% of 150,000 votes? Let's say that's, I don't know, what is that? Not 100,000, 120, 10,000, 20, a lot, right? So if all those votes go to the Democrats, that's going to close that margin pretty quickly. If those numbers hold, they keep coming in at that 80-20 split, then it's going to, I think, continue. And the Democrats may be doing well. All right, so let's see down here. Loeffler versus Warnock, 50.9 to 49.1, 1.9 million to 1.83 million. So we'll just see. We'll just continue to watch this stuff, folks. See any other questions? Why is Cobb County so late? Don't know. The others are cheating. Why can't Pence do what he can't do? We've got some other Fulton County up to no good again. Yeah, and it looks like most people are probably checking out because it's about that time. Right? On the East Coast, it's, what is it, 10:30? Almost 10:30 over there. So we're going to wrap it up here, folks. We're going to continue to monitor these results. We'll have some new updates tomorrow. I think that it's going to be very, very close. No matter who wins, there's probably going to be lawsuits, recounts, audits, a lot of the same stuff that we've been already reliving for the past several weeks. It's going to be going on into the foreseeable future. So we're going to leave it right here. I want to wish everybody a very lovely evening. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. We've been here for about 3.5 hours now, and it's been enjoyable. This is a moment I think that is very important in our country. The Democrats control the House. They're probably going to be controlling the White House after tomorrow. And today we're talking about the Senate. So they could control the Senate, the House, the White House. With those two branches of government, they have the power to remake the third branch of government, which is the judiciary. Whether they do that or not will be something to be seen. That is provided that they win tonight, and it's looking like they are losing in both races. So we'll see what happens. The bigger question is going to be, well, what happens? We're going to wake up tomorrow. We want to see if there's a bunch of 3 a.m., 4 a.m. votes that come in like they did on November 3rd. That might change the results. May wake up tomorrow with a different outcome. We don't know. But the sort of the kind of the tangential question that we have not talked about is what happens if the Republicans win both big? What did that mean in November 3rd? Did that mean that, maybe they would have won that, or was this a sort of after the fact, or does one have nothing to do with the other? What if the Democrats win both here? Does that show that there was no electoral fraud on November 3rd, that the Democrats just, they got a strong showing. They had a strong showing November 3rd. They had a strong showing on January 6th, 5th. Right, so a lot of those arguments are going to be coming up and bubbling around on the internet. We're going to see what we can do to add some value to it and sort through some of it. So that's going to be it for us, everybody. I want to thank you so much again for being with us. Couple quick reminders. We're going to put the show notes, the slides, in our Discord server. So if you want access to those, feel free to go in there and get them. Discord is where we chat before and after the show. There's a free copy of my book in there as well. It's called Beginning to Winning: How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. You can also grab it on Amazon if you want to buy a copy, but there's a free PDF literally in the Discord. So just go on in there, get a copy of that, and read it to your little heart's content. We also, before we sign off, I want to mention that this is not my regular day job. I am, work at a law firm here, the R&R Law Group, where we help good people who have been charged with crimes, and we take cases in the state of Arizona. So if it's a situation where you happen to know somebody who is in a situation like that, where they, got into some trouble over the holidays, or they need help, they want to clear up a record, or whatever that looks like, we would be honored if you sent them our way. We do a very good job. We offer free case evaluations. We have an awesome team here. We have a mission to help provide people with safety, clarity, and hope in their criminal cases and for their futures. And we'd be honored if you trusted us enough to send them our direction. But that is it. That's all I've got. We're going to be back here tomorrow. Going to be at the same time, 7 p.m. on the East Coast, 6 p.m. Central for those of you in Texas and the heartland of America. We've got 5 p.m. Arizona time, my time, Mountain Time, which is when we start, and 4 p.m. on the West Coast. We want to make sure that you're here with us. We're going to start at that time. It may be another long show depending on what is happening in Congress, or maybe not, right? Maybe they just get it all settled and decided. Going to be one of the most, I think, exciting, important days of the political season for I don't know, maybe the decade. I mean, it's pretty wild what's going to be going on tomorrow. It could be consequential. It could be not, but we're going to be along for the ride. We want to invite you to join us as well. As always, we would appreciate a subscribe if you have not already done that. If you're watching this on replay or just stopping by, subscription would be awesome. We're real close to hitting that number. And a like, a thumbs up, a share. If you could email this to a friend or a family and just invite them to come on and join us for the conversation. We like to have, little friendly conversations, sort of equal opportunity criticisms of both sides, and have a friendly chat. It's like friends around the dinner table talking politics without jumping across and gouging each other's eyes out. So hopefully you found that to be as enjoyable as I do on a regular basis, and you want to invite somebody to come and be a part of it. Be forever grateful. Other than that, my friends, I want to thank you once again for being with us. I want to wish you a very warm, nice, restful night's sleep, because you're going to need your energy for tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I want to make sure that you are here and with us. So until that time, thanks again. Have a wonderful evening. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.